Council for Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. Clerk?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 12 present and voting in civic clerk and 12 present in the meeting.
Thank you, Clerk. At this time, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for our invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight, to lead us in our invocation, I am incredibly honored to welcome First Lady Alice Green to join us. Yes, please approach the podium. I have a short biography to read for First Lady Alice Green. I think she's known to many of you here in the meeting and in the community. She's, of course, the wife of the late Pastor Green of Divine Temple, and thought it was appropriate to invite First Lady Green to join us tonight because we do have the honor of renaming the basketball courts at Fisk Park in her late husband's honor. And so just feel incredibly blessed to be able to welcome First Lady Green, who was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She attended Saints Junior College and Jackson State University in Mississippi. She later attended the University of Milwaukee, where she obtained her degree in the fields of education. At Divine Temple, she's a Sunday school teacher, Sunshine Band instructor, and the president of the YWCC. First Lady Green is a devoted wife, mother of 3 wonderful children, and grandmother of 9 beautiful grandchildren. She's also the co-pastor of Divine Temple Church. Welcome to you, First Lady Green.
Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you right now for this day. We thank you for our mayor. We thank you for our city. We thank you for every leadership that is working here to make our city a safe place for us to live and have a peaceful life. We thank you how you touch in their hearts and mind, that they will have the wisdom and the understanding to go by, to do the duty that is required for our city. And we thank you for just allowing us to have the air that we breathe and allowing us to fellowship and get the understanding how to work together and how to lead our city and work in our community. And we thank you in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for joining us. Approval of the minutes. Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell. That was seconded by Alder Stevens. Any changes there? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Approval of the agenda.
Approve. Second.
Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. Alder Brunette.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda for specifically the Finance Committee meeting. And I'd like to move R10 ahead of R9. I can explain that if I need to, if there's a second.
Motion has been made to amend the Finance Committee report to place R10 in front of R9. Alder Brunette.
And the reason for that, and you'll see a rather unusual item on the agenda, a notice that I place that I take not lightly, by the way, a motion to rescind or a communication to rescind a previous action of the council. The reason that is important to me is that the funding that we were holding for the branding initiative or rebranding initiative could be used and should, in my opinion, be used to pay down some of the bond issue. And so the timing, the place on the agenda will need to be flipped because the R9 will be a result of whatever is decided in R10, so it needs to be before. And what I would ask the city attorney when we get to that point of the agenda, because it's rather unorthodox, nothing I've experienced before, can you kind of guide me on when to make a motion or how I can make a motion that fulfills open records requests, or open records and open meetings, I should say. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the motion has been made to put R10 in front of R9. It was made by Alder Brunette and seconded by, was it Alder Johnson? Alder Scannell with a question.
Are we taking every item up singly now? Don't we take the whole report and then pull?
We still have the same tradition, yeah.
I don't understand the need for this. We get to the finance report, you pull what you want. It doesn't make sense to me.
I think it's just the sequencing of the items.
But if we're taking the whole report, you can pull whatever item, whatever.
Customarily, we take the items up in sequential order, and Alder Brunette would prefer to have 10 in front of
So,
9.
okay, all right, I get it now. All right. Makes sense to me now. Good
Any,
call. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The agenda has been amended. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve as amended.
Motion to approve as amended has been made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Corpus Dax. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That agenda has been approved as amended. On to report by the mayor. I'll keep it brief this evening. We've got a lot of items to get to, especially with respect to our finance agenda. I think the committee has done some really nice work in whittling things down while still recognizing all of the priorities that we have in the city with respect to infrastructure in particular. So thanks to Chair Dorff and the committee for all the work done there. Would ask for your approval on that report this evening. We'll move along to announcements. Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple tonight. One, I wanted to grudgingly thank the Green Bay School Board for finally making masks optional. I know my son, who's at West High, is immensely grateful. Better late than never. Too bad we're the last school district in the county, but I hope they stay true to their word. And I also hope that we can start moving all of our committee meetings now to City Hall. You know, if all chairs can start moving them here. I think if we can hold our council meetings, we can have all our committee meetings and start getting back to normal. Finally, you know, I'm shaking my head once again in disbelief at the serious and obvious election blunder that happened yesterday. After the past few elections that degraded and gutted trust in our election process, everyone hoped 2022 would bring a new focus
Point of order.
on
Alder-
election
Alder
integrity
Galvin.
and transparency.
Is this not announcements?
Oh, I have an announcement.
I think it,
I've heard people blunder on for 5 minutes in their announcements. Strange you take,
So at the end of this dissertation, there'll be an announcement?
it's more of a novel, but dissertation's fine.
Okay.
I mean, Alder Galvin raises a valid point. You know, if you're interested in speaking about the election, you might want to place that on the agenda.
I'm about half done, so if you wouldn't cut me off, I would be done by now.
But it's not a noticed item on our
It's an
agenda this evening.
announcement. I've heard people talk about trees and drunk driving and breast cancer and all kinds of different things under announcements. So I have every right to talk about it, and I will continue.
Point of order, I'd like
Alder Dorff?
legal to please give us
Oh, there is such
some
a
advice
kerfuffle over
on
my
whether
announcement.
or not this is, in fact, allowable during announcement times.
You haven't even heard it yet.
Attorney Bungert?
Yes, hello, good evening. Traditionally, council has allowed alders to kind of present different points or things that they wanted to alert the council to. So as long as Alder Weary is limiting his comments to basically just announcing in brevity whatever his thoughts are regarding the election, but not getting too far into a realm where we're debating an issue or debating an action or discussing potential positioning on action or items that could be coming in front of council, as that wasn't properly noticed.
Thanks, Attorney Bungert. Alder Weary?
All right, thanks. It was really 2 paragraphs, and I was halfway done, but I admire the circling of wagons. That's interesting. I'm going to start from the beginning, though. I am shaking my head once again in disbelief at the serious and obvious election blunder that happened yesterday. After the past few elections that degraded and gutted trust in our election process, everyone hoped that 2022 would bring a new focus on election integrity and transparency, especially transparency. Sadly, this has already been shattered after a limited, fairly easy spring primary election. What I witnessed and heard are glaringly different than the official narrative the council was emailed from our city attorney about an hour ago. I am deeply disturbed and have little faith in our ability to run an even bigger election. I think we need to shake things up in the clerk's office. I will put in a communication to address improvements to our election processes and a review of the debacle that occurred yesterday. Mr. Mayor, I ask for your cooperation in these serious matters and not just condescending tweets. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Other announcements? Alder Brunette?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Kind of along the same wavelength, I'm making this announcement directly to my constituents, many of whom contacted me, called me, not just within my district, but throughout the city. So this is relevant because it's directed towards the public who we're accountable to. All aspects of conducting free and fair elections, including the witnessing of vote counting, are essential cornerstones of our American government, our constitutional republic, and our democratic process. Voters and citizens of Green Bay deserve and have every right to demand complete trust and integrity in all aspects of election administration conducted by Green Bay government, a government which 100% belongs to them and not to the elected leaders or city employees at any particular moment in time. For the third time in 23 months of conducting elections, our city has eroded the public trust in one of our most essential constitutional duties. That is the truth, whether those in leadership want to acknowledge that or not. Green Bay government needs to restore public trust in our elections. But there can be no repairs of trust without sincere contrition of wrongdoing from those who made errors. Instead, we get attempts to explain away poor administration through excuses, equivocation, or worse, blaming conditions created by COVID. Green Bay government shall no longer consider itself a victim of COVID and not use that as an excuse for bad administration. Other municipalities are doing just fine under the same conditions. As of today, I'm not sure what collective action our city council must take to restore trust in our election administration. I do know that I will be listening very closely to the 9,000 plus people I am responsible to serve and represent. Sadly, given the accumulation of events, poor judgment, and the avoidance of addressing the underlying issues causing thousands of Green Bay citizens' righteous and justified anger towards our election administration, I feel compelled, and I say this not lightly, to state that today I lack confidence in our ability to conduct the remaining 2022 elections without incident. I'm hoping this is properly addressed before March by our city government, or it is going to be necessary for the city council to take some sort of action to restore public trust in all aspects of free and fair elections as conducted by their city government. Thank you.
Any other announcements from Council? Alder Scannell?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to thank the Green Bay Public Schools for acting responsibly. They are the largest school district in the county and have unique issues all their own. I trust the school board to make wise decisions. I believe they have. And I want to thank them for all they've done through this tough time. Election trust. I don't know what happened yesterday. I guess I live under a rock or something. But I think it's pretty rich that there are alders talking about trust in elections when all they have done for a year is rip and claw with baseless allegations without a shred of evidence that the past elections were done unfairly. Not a shred of evidence. And yet they continue with this nonsense. It's getting old. If there was a mistake yesterday, let's look at it, let's fix it. That's what we've done before. All this grandstanding and all this crap about how our elections are unfair. Show me the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Stoyer?
Thank you, Your Honor. Like other alders, a lot of us got phone calls about what happened yesterday. I'm not looking at the last two elections. I'm just looking at what happened yesterday, and I think citizens just wanted to know. So, was it a mistake, a typo, whatever? I think that you know, we as council members represent 9,000 citizens, and a lot of times we don't always know what's going on with, you know, with the administration and that. We just need some transparency. I want to be a public servant. I just want to do the work of a public servant. I don't want to have to keep answering phone calls about now what's going on. It hurts. It hurts me to do that. I don't want to do that. So all I'm saying is that the citizens just want transparency. They just want to feel that things are fair. That's all. And, you know, if the administration can help us, the council, in any way with that, that would be really fully appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and maybe inject some lightheartedness into the room. So next week, Tuesday, February 22nd, is the annual State of the Broadway District. So obviously it is my employer, so it's a little selfless plug, but also a very important part of our downtown corridor. The public is invited. I'm inviting each of you as members of council to attend. You can register at downtowngreenbay.com, and we'll be providing a number of updates about what's going on in our community on topics other than what we've just heard about. So thank you, Mayor.
Looking forward to that. Thanks, Alder. Any other announcements from council? Seeing none, we'll move along to appointments.
Motion to approve.
The new appointments, Alder? Motion has been made to approve the new appointments by Alder Scannell. Seconded by Alder Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that new appointment has been made. Reappointments?
Motion to reappoint.
Motion to make that reappointment made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Corpus Dax. Any discussion? All,
If you could record me as a no on Lisa Hanson. Thank you.
thank you, Alder. Now that was Alder Weary. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That appointment has been made. On to item J. There's a notice here in regards to a motion that Alder Brunette may make at some point. So just wanted to flag that for everyone's attention. On to ordinance's second reading for adoption.
Motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Motion has been made to suspend the rules and take up these ordinances with one roll call vote,
Number 3.
with the exception of item.
Motion to suspend the rules for items 1 and 2.
Motion has been made to suspend the rules for items 1 and 2. Take those items up with one roll call vote. That was made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. Discussion on those? Seeing none, we will use the board.
Thank you, your alders. You may vote. Thank you. Here's your displayed vote.
And those are adopted unanimously, 12-0. On to item K3.
Second.
Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder LaFave. Any discussion? Alder Weary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we've had a lot of debate and discussion on this over the last couple months. I think it's wise that we would hold on this until the first meeting after the next election and let the citizens weigh in on this. It's a pretty big item. So I'm making a motion to hold this until the first meeting after the April elections.
Alder Weary makes a motion to hold this item until the first meeting in April. That was seconded by Alder Stoyer. Further discussion?
And if we could record it.
Seeing none, a recorded vote. Alder Dorf on this question?
I'm certainly going to vote against this. I think this is something that we are ready to deal with tonight. We need to deal with this tonight. We've talked about it for a long time, and it's something that I truly believe in. So I am against holding this. I would like to speak about this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any other comments? Seeing none, a request was made to use the board, and again, this is a motion to hold this item until the first meeting in April.
Thank you, Alders. You may vote. Thank you. Here's your displayed vote.
And that motion fails 6-6. Item before us is a motion to approve this ordinance. That was made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. We will use the Alder Weary.
Mayor, I would just note, it's obvious there's no clear consensus on the council right now, which is why I think it's wise that we vote it down, let the next council bring it up. This is about appointments for department heads. It's strange that this is coming in at really the last hour here before our next council is going to be seated. I think we want to think on this. So thanks. Record the vote. I'm voting no.
Recorded vote has been requested and is required for an ordinance adoption, so that will be done. Alder Scannell and Alder Brunette.
I think it's strange that it's strange. This is just business. We're doing business. Things come up. I know of no reason why this was held or whatever. No evidence for that, but let's make some more baseless allegations. No?
Alder Weary.
You know me well enough.
Alder Scannell, just to
Yep.
address the chair, please.
Yep. So I fully support this going forward. If it's interesting what some alders are thinking are big conditions. My district's pretty quiet on all this stuff. Not an issue. So I support it. This is just our job. I see no reason to put it off. And if the constituents are upset about it, they can take it out at the polls. So, as always, with anything. Well, that's true of everything.
Thanks,
So,
Alder.
there we go. Thank you.
Alder Brunette, then Alder LaFave.
Mayor, I'm a no vote, 6-6 vote. It was rather close to hold. I do think that every election serves as a wonderful opportunity to hear from the public what they think of their city government, and that happens through elections. And there have been a lot of issues that have been controversial within our city government and our city council and our deliberations. And I do believe that we should be giving the public through the election the opportunity to put people in office or remove people from office who consider themselves either supporters of current department heads or those who are critical of department heads. I see no reason to move this forward when the new council, within a few months from now, will be a direct result of what the public is feeling towards their city government. So I'm in motion, I'm in support of I'm going to vote against moving this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder LaFave.
I'm for moving it forward. It's not going to make any difference. I mean, we can make the decision tonight. We can wait. Why? Why do you want to wait? This is something that I think we're the only city in our locale, and further, I think, is it Appleton we went down to? We researched other cities, what they do. We're the only one that does this. And I think our directors in our departments, they want certainty. Some talking about this, they're wondering, well, am I going to have my job or not in a few months? They need certainty. And I think if somebody really does a really bad job, there's a lot of complaints against them, I think this council would have the forethought to look into it and to really make a good decision and maybe remove the person. I mean, it doesn't mean that we can't remove them. It just, I think that it would be good, it's good practice for government to do this. And I would just say that I think we need to move forward on it, and it's time, let's just do it. Why hold it off? Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Any other comments? Alder Dorf.
Thank you, Mayor. So Alder Weary had apparently asked people to email us or email me, but I want to read the response to a question. Oh, you did not? Oh, well, that person said that
Okay,
you had.
Alder Weary, thank you.
Okay, thank you. They already, I they wanted that me to vote no on this because they felt that the mayor should have a right to make a decision on the positions. And so I responded, they already hold their positions at the discretion of the mayor. The difference is the council must now have just cause to remove them. It aligns with the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, in which due process is required, and people may not be dismissed from their employment for arbitrary or capricious reasons. Employment under the 14th Amendment is a property right, and that entitles them to due process. As a patriot, an elected official who has pledged to support our Constitution, I cannot support the current process in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to provide some clarity because I did vote to hold because I personally don't see where the fire is to take action on this tonight. However, I am going to vote to support the ordinance, given that this is the exact vote that we're going to take now. And I just want to explain why the shift on that one. My principles for supporting this last time we voted on it have not changed. And now we are in a position where we are obviously taking a vote, yes or no, if we support this. We've debated this previously, but really this just puts Green Bay in alignment with just about every other community out there, our state government, our federal government. With all due respect to Alder Dorff, I'm not sure that the due process piece concerns me as much because obviously that due process does not exist with an at-will employee in that if somebody is not performing the way that the mayor expects them to, that ability still exists to remove an individual for that reason. But that being said, I think, again, this just creates a little bit more, for all the reasons we've talked, a little bit more security for our staff, a little bit more attractiveness when applying here, and we have options when somebody is not performing the way that they ought to. So again, I was supportive of the hold because I don't see the urgency to take action on it, but now we're in a position where this is the vote. So I will support it.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Stroy?
Thank you, Your Honor. In my 10 years on council, we've had almost no situations where a department head left his job for whatever reason, or we took him out. My feeling is that if the department heads are doing their job, they have nothing to worry about. I've had nothing but good luck or good working relationships with most of these department heads. That's not the point. So the point for me is that if they have nothing to fear, then this should just move along every 2 years. So I understand both sides on this. I know that other communities have it as such. I was hoping to hold it as well to the next council. That would have been my preference, but because we have to vote, I'm just not comfortable doing it, so I will be voting no.
Thanks, Alder. Any others? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second and a need to use the board on all ordinances, so we will do that.
Thank you, Alders. You may vote.
And this is a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Thank you. Here is your displayed vote.
And that ordinance is adopted 7-5. On to report of the Park Committee.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Stevens. Any items here to be handled separately? No. Okay. Seeing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that that report has been adopted. Rather, I just wanted everyone in the audience to know that includes the request by Alder Scannell to officially name the Fisk Park basketball courts in memory and honor of Elsie Green, civil rights activist and pastor of Divine Temple. So thank you to the council for taking that action. Thanks to the Green family for being here, and more importantly, for the legacy that Pastor Green has left for this community and the legacy that you continue to further, First Lady Green and the entire congregation at Divine Temple. So thank you. Report of the Redevelopment Authority. Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell. Seconded by Alder Gerlach. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The report has been adopted. Improvement and Services Committee. Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Gerlach. Items here to be handled separately. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the report has been adopted. Protection and Policy. Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder LaFave. Items here to be handled separately. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Report of the Protection and Policy Committee granting operator licenses. Motion to approve made by Alder LaFave, seconded by Alder Scannell. Any names here to be handled separately or any abstentions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Plan Commission. Motion to approve made by Alder Corpus Dax, seconded by Alder Scannell. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That report has been approved. Finance Committee. Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. Any items here to be handled separately?
Number 1.
9 and 10.
1, 10, and 9.
I just need to be recorded as abstaining on item number 7. Is that?
Alder Johnson requests he be noted as abstaining on item 7. Any others to be held separately? All right, seeing no others. All in favor of approving the remainder of that report, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the report has been approved with the exception of items 1, 10, and 9. Wishes on item 1 is to approve. That was made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Galvin. The item was pulled by Alder Stoyer. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. These are more or less some questions for either Director Ellenbecker or Director Schwant, if they're here. I wanted to know, forward appraisal, what are they receiving in payment, for the work they are doing? And is this above and beyond the original appropriated budget for the project? Just need clarification.
Yes, this is Alder. This is Director Ellenbecker. Alder Sawyer. I don't remember exactly the date, but we bonded, the council approved bonding or borrowing at a state trust fund loan of $340,000. That would have been in the end of 2020 or the early of 21. And that is the cost to do the revaluation.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to ask, they were talking about the reval for executive homes, which is at 125.4% of level. How was this number arrived at? And it says, since the homes are well above 100% assessment level, these assessments should see a decrease. And I'm just wondering what the level is for executive homes. Is there a number that is out there that describes that?
I'm trying to find an email, but I do believe during the Finance Committee meeting, I thought Russ had said, or the assessor had said something around $750,000, $800,000 homes. But I also had an email on it, but I believe that's what he referenced in the Finance Committee meeting.
Okay. Also, since the city is performing market updates and drive-by revaluations for the revaluation, is there a plan to look at exterior revaluations and full revaluations of residential properties? And that means, going into a house, that type of thing. Some people have requested that, which I find kind of strange, but if somebody put together a project where they worked without a permit, how are we catching that? Is there any idea?
At this point, as the assessor had explained, it is a market reval. So it is not going to be going into each home. It's going to be based on sales, and it's going to be a market reval. And now, however, he did say that if somebody requested it would like somebody, an appraiser to walk through their home, they would absolutely go there, but that is not the intent of a market reval.
Okay, those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that item has been dispensed with. On to item 10. Motion to approve made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. That item was pulled by Alder Brunette.
Thank you, Mayor. Attorney Bungert, this is where I need a little help trying to explain to the council what it is I'm looking to do and the process to get there. This is in regards to my public notice that I requested on the agenda to rescind previous action of the council so that the funds for rebranding could be used in addition to other Oneida dollars towards the borrowing request reduction. So Attorney Bungert, could you kind of advise me on how to proceed with creating a motion?
Yes. So with respect to the motion to rescind that you are trying to put forward, it can't be brought at this point because there is a motion pending to approve it. So according to Robert's Rules 35:2, a motion to rescind takes precedence over nothing and can only be moved only when no other motion is pending. So while effectually you are trying, your motion to rescind is connected to this item, procedurally it's not. So like one thing isn't dependent on the other. The motion to rescind stands on its own. So you can essentially make that motion at any point whenever another question isn't on the floor being discussed and or when there's no other motion pending.
Alder Brunette?
That doesn't make sense at all. Earlier in the meeting, under announcements, I asked you to kind of advise me on where this would go into the agenda. Are you saying that the intended motion that I'd like to make is not possible?
I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it can't interrupt now.
When can
Provided,
I introduce?
and I did hear you ask that you were going to have questions. I didn't interpret that at that time that question wasn't directed to me, and the chair didn't recognize me either. For me to be able to interject. So I thought it was more for context. So I apologize if you were asking for me to interject at that point. I'm saying that if you want to bring that motion, it can't be done right now because a motion to approve has already been made.
When, I guess the question is, when could I make that motion? At what point?
When no other motion is on.
I know, but when would that be though? That's what I'm struggling with because obviously, can I?
Essentially, it could be once a vote on this item happens between us moving, between reports. All that is required is that a speaker can't be interrupted by the motion, and the motion yields to other subsidiary privileged and incidental motions. Essentially, the way it works is you would just need to be recognized by the chair. The chair would recognize you, and then you would move to make that motion to rescind. It would need a second, and then it can be debated and voted on.
So before the personnel, after we're done speaking about finance, before the mayor goes to the
moves
personnel.
On to the next, yes.
Then
You could request the chair to recognize you, correct.
Okay, so the motion on the floor for item 10 is to use the remaining funds from the cooperative governance agreement. I'm still support of that motion. That was something that came out of the finance committee that I think received unanimous support. So I would be in favor of the motion on the floor, item 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Galvin.
Thank you, Your Honor. At that finance meeting, where I think the board worked very well with Alder Burnett to make use of the funds not directed towards, the Oneida funds not directed towards the rebranding, but I thought he had a good suggestion to put it towards capital improvements or bond reduction. I did make mention at that meeting about seeing if the police department could look into, instead of buying a new armored car for $500,000, if they could look at what it would take, maybe rehab it. And the chief has been looking into that, and if he could, apprise council of what he's found out.
Absolutely. Chief Davis?
Sure. So we contacted the manufacturer and found out that we can, in fact, send that back, I believe, to Massachusetts and have it rehabilitated. They have not given us, we haven't had them do a specific price quote for us, but we estimate the cost of that to be around $150,000. And it would extend the life of that piece of equipment by several years. So it would probably be cost effective to do that at this point rather than replacing it. The other thing that we have found out is that that piece of equipment is shared with the Brown County Sheriff's Office, and we have a memorandum of understanding with the Sheriff's Office that they're responsible for half of major maintenance costs for that. So I have a call in to the sheriff, and I believe we're going to speak tomorrow and gauge his interest. So we have found a way, at least we think, to fix this problem for considerably less than we originally thought it was going to cost.
Alder Galvin?
Thank you, Chief. And with that information, I would like to make a motion to hold $150,000 of this money for rehabbing the armored car, pending our discussion with the Sheriff's Department. Should the Sheriff's Department recognize and agree to do their part of the memorandum of understanding that we have, then obviously that would free up half of that money, and it could be used towards either bonding or other capital improvement projects that were put to the curb, basically, with our financial issues this year. And while I understand a lot of other programs were put to the side, I think that if we can get basically a $500,000 vehicle for $75,000, extending it out many years, I think that overall would be one of the best uses of this extra money that we have there. Thank you.
I second that amendment to the main motion.
Okay, Alder Galvin makes an amendment. Could you just repeat your amendment?
Sure. That $150,000 of the excess Oneida money,
Of the 157?
of the 157.
Okay.
Be held until it can be determined if the memorandum of understanding will take place with the Sheriff's Department. Should that happen, then obviously $75,000 of that would be freed up for other expenditures in the future.
Okay. That amendment does have a second from Alder Dorf. Yeah, and then I also want to go to Director Ellenbecker for some response there, but Alder Johnson.
Thank you. Just looking for a little bit more clarity in the motion, Alder Galvin. If the memorandum is agreed to, then we would only need to hold 75,000. Could you help clarify for all of us why you're requesting 150?
Yes, even though the Green Bay Police Department and the Sheriff's Department have many memorandums of understanding, and they do get along very well with each other, there are times where the Sheriff's Department may not have that money right now with their budgeting. And so it may be something that they have to look forward in the future to pay us back, and we may have to put out the whole $150,000 at once.
But it would still be your expectation that eventually they would meet that obligation?
Absolutely.
We just have the flexibility at the staff level to figure out how that works?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alder. Director Ellenbecker just wanted you to respond to this discussion to say whether or not, from your perspective, this is a workable amendment.
Yes, just to be clarified, this would be either 75,000 or 100 for a repair of the current armored vehicle that the police owns, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then this wouldn't affect our bonding because that item is not in the bonding. So at this point, what we would have to do, it would be allowed, of course, and it could be a budget amendment we have to put the money into the 2021 budget, and then we would do a budget carryover for one of those dollar amounts. And then what would happen is, again, I need to be specific when we do the budget carryover, and I would need to know what the money was going to be used for. So then we would say in this case it would be a police equipment repair. So yes, that would be allowable.
Okay, and just to clarify, the alder said that this would be designating $150,000 or setting aside $150,000 of the $157,192 that was referenced in the motion. Okay, so we've had good discussion, an amendment, a second. All in favor will signify. Yes, Alder Scannell.
Just, I support all this, but I'm curious as, I mean, it seems kind of vague to me. How, will the money be coming back to us again and again to make decisions on, or when will the decisions be made on this? How will they be made? Will that be through the finance committee, or how will this money be handled going forward?
This money, the 157,000 or the
Well,
150,000?
The 7,192 and eventually the 75,000.
Director Allenbecker?
At this point, yes. If your motion is reversed, that you're no longer holding this 157,182 for bond reduction, you choose to put 150,000 into equipment repairs. That $7,000, if it is not reallocated for bond reduction, at that point, it would be just a favorability to the 2021 operating budget, and it really would just fall to fund balance at the end of the year.
But if we are to do what Alder Galvin has suggested, what you've said, Director Allenbecker, is that we would need to have a carryover resolution and then a budget amendment resolution. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, there would have to be two resolutions, yes, to approve that money being carried over for when that expense actually happens in 2022.
Okay, thank you. Alder LaFave?
If we're saying we're taking the 150,000 and the $7,192, the 157,000 was supposed to go to the rebranding. No. Okay, just want to make sure, because I thought that was the way it was written here. Okay.
Right, yeah, so if this succeeds, then there's just that 7,192 to reduce the borrowing. Alder Vanderleest?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if that, for fixing the armored car, if that money could come out of the American Rescue Plan, just like for the cameras, could it come out of that, designated money?
Theoretically, yes. I mean, there's kind of two answers to that. I don't know if Director Ellenbecker, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, one would say is if it's a one-time improvement to this piece of equipment, it could be a use of the $10 million loss revenue calculation, correct. If it's considered a ongoing maintenance or an operational cost, then it would not qualify. So if it would be considered a one-time maintenance, it could qualify for ARPA.
Okay. I was under the understanding that, a lot of the properties at the Oneida Nation that are coming off of the tax rule, that, that was part of the overall plan when it was discussed that money that would come from the Oneidas, that we'd use it to, lower our mill rate. And, I think that's where the money really should go. In other words, it should, when people aren't going to, in other words, whatever goes in trust, there was quite a few homes that were going in trust, we won't be collecting the taxes. So I think that was kind of the, the real gist of what the money should really be used for. That would be my thought. And, if we can fix this vehicle with, one-time deal and use the American Rescue Money Plan, I'd say I'd be willing to shift in that direction, and he'd still get the vehicle fixed, and we'd still, kind of stay on the course as far as keeping the mill rate just lowered a bit. And, I think we've had tax increases, the last 3 years, almost 8% of tax increases. And, I think people, they don't really want to, keep seeing tax increases. We should be fiscal responsible as far as how we're looking at some of these things. So that's my thoughts. I'd make that motion that we do it that way.
So we have an amendment to a motion right now. You're seeking to amend the amendment?
That would be my motion, that we would take the money from the American Rescue Plan and fix the vehicle. Yeah, it's because if it qualifies, and we take the other money that we designated and, use it towards, really the intent was, because we're losing that tax money every year. And they're giving us the I don't forget the exact figure that we're getting from United, if it's 350,000 or 500,000, whatever it is. That's really what we're, that was a jest of, letting it, we're not challenging these cases, in the courts, so we're not spending the money in the court system, and we're letting them put them in trust. So that's my thought, and that would be my motion. We'd switch gears and fix the armored vehicle and use that money that's designated from the Oneidas for the tax reduction in the mill rate.
Okay, this is rather complicated, so I'm going to ask Attorney Bungert to weigh in just to see how procedurally we should handle this.
Yep, I'm reviewing Robert's rules right now, but just so that we're clear, so we had a motion to approve, then we had a motion to amend that motion with the specific terms provided by Alder Galvin. That was seconded, by Bill. And now we have another motion by Alder Vanderleest, but no second as of yet, correct?
Was there a second? Seconded by Weary.
Okay. I need a couple of minutes just to review if that can happen.
Okay, and while you're doing a little bit of research, I'm going to go to Chief Davis just to talk about some of the things that are kind of ongoing in terms of ARPA resources and how this might or might not factor in there.
Sure. So as everybody knows, we've been allocated $2 million of ARPA resources with a focus to be on reducing crime in the city. And we intentionally did not request a lot of equipment from that bucket of money because of the expectation, as we understood it, that was intended for bringing down violent crime. And as you all know, we have already proposed about $1 million worth of things to do with that money, and then we will anticipate coming back later in the spring with about another $1 million worth of more program-oriented uses for ARPA money to bring down violent crime once we get the work back from the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform, which would include something like, along the lines of an Office of Violence Prevention, and some things that we would need to set that up. So certainly every dollar that we spend on other things is less that we would be able to spend on those efforts.
Okay, thanks, Chief. We've got a few hands in the air. Alder Sawyer, then Alder Gerlach, and a couple others are in the queue.
This might be for Director Ellenbecker. We have two motions, one depending how you look at it, Alder Galvin and then Alder Vanderleest. And I was just wondering, Director Ellenbecker, is there a way to look at each one of those and find what our mill rate might be for each one of those? Is there a way to compare those two to see what would be advantageous for us? Or is it too early? Well,
it really would be a $150,000 either reduction in your bonding or next year if somehow we have to find money, yes, to repair this armored vehicle, so it would be $150,000 reduction in maybe next year's bonding or in the ARPA. I'm not sure, for every,
okay.
If it's $150,000 reduction in an operating budget, that would be about 2.5 cents reduction on the mill rate. If it's a reduction in your bonding, typically go out 10 years, I would have to try to calculate it. It would be a very small increase over 10 years. Reduction, 150,000 over 10 years, it would be a very small reduction.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Alder, I'm sorry if that answered your question.
That's fine. I just wanted to compare those two, and that's fine. I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder Gerlach.
Believe it or not, I think I see a light at the end of the tunnel. It seems to me, if I understand this correctly, that the motion was to use the $157,192 toward 2022 capital purchases And then we had the amendment to take $150,000 out of there to use for the police vehicle. And I think all Alder Vanderleest is asking to do is simply to defeat that amendment and leave it just as it is, because we certainly can't vote now on how to use ARPA funds. Did I get it?
And we could certainly handle it that way. I think the question for Attorney Bungert is whether or not Alder Vanderleest's amendment is properly before us.
I think I do have an answer. It's essentially, it is proper. It's not out of order. It's essentially considered a secondary amendment. So a motion to amend can be applied to itself. And it's essentially functioning as an amendment to an amendment.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Bungert. We've got that amendment from Alder Vanderleest. It's been seconded by Alder Weary. The tricky thing here is, we also have these categories of spending within ARPA. This is sort of like committee work on the fly. But having said that, Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. So essentially what we have before us, Alder Vanderleest's amendment, is really just to alter the funding source. I saw a lot of heads nodding, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but it seems to me that there may be some general support around Alder Galvin's proposal, which is to have this unit repaired, most importantly, not bonding for it. And so really it's in front of this body, I think, is almost a choice. Do we want to use ARPA dollars for that, or do we want to use the Oneida or the Cooperative Governance Agreement excess funds for that? So to Alder Vanderleest's point, and I appreciate the sentiment, to me, the Cooperative Governance Agreement funding has the equivalency of levy-supported dollars. I say the equivalency because clearly it's not coming directly from property taxes, but it is in a sense meant to reproduce that. So I think I would rather, I'm going to vote against the amendment because I do think that there are some really good proposals coming forward on the ARPA investments that, just slightly different buckets of money, but at the end of the day, we're looking to do the same thing. It's just what's going to get us the maximum amount of flexibility with which pot of money. So I hope that's making sense, and I think using the surplus funds here for Alder Galvin's proposal is the wiser path forward, so that we can continue to use those ARPA funds in a way that helps us address the rising crime that we've all been talking about, right? We've said that we want to see solutions on that. Our police department, our finance department, the mayor's office have been working on some proposals for that. So I too think I'd rather see that funding preserved to deploy in that instance. And as I said, I'm going to vote against the amendment, but I will support Alder Galvin's amendment if that does come back to the floor.
Thanks, Alder. I think Alder Scannell was in the queue, then Alder, are you?
No,
Then Alder LaFave? Alder Scannell.
Okay. Which amendment are we taking first?
Alder Vanderleest.
Okay. Then, I don't support the amendment to the amendment. I see the Oneida's contribution as replacing the mill rate. We don't usually use the mill rate to put down the mill rate. Which is what, when we.
Alder Scannell has the floor.
We use the mill rate to provide services and, or pay down debt, but, so I think this would be an appropriate use for these funds, and not knowing to just shift to the ARPA without having all that information in front of us, I think is difficult. I don't want to do that. I want to make an informed decision, and that information just isn't here to do that with. So I think this makes sense to use these funds this way for Alder Galvin's amendment, so that's what I'm going to support. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder LaFave, and then Alder Dorf.
Yes, I do not support the amendment of the amendment. I also, listening to the chief, I think it would be a disservice to take the money that he has been allocated out of the ARPA funds to try to take care of our problems that we have with our, crime rate. And I think that he will do a very good job on that. And I think we should make sure that he has the dollar amounts to do this, not takes, and this would be just a little bit we're taking out of there, and then, but still, he'd be short maybe on what he wants to do. So I believe that, yes, it'd be advantageous for us to take it out of the United Cooperative Agreement. I think that's a proper place.
Okay, thanks, Alder. Alder Dorf?
Thank you. Alder Johnson and Alder Scannell and Alder LaFave spoke so well. I agree with everything they said. I don't need to repeat what they said. Thank you. I will not be supporting the amendment to the amendment.
Thanks, Alder. Any other discussion? Alder Burnett?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just want to backtrack, and the real reason, the genesis of all this, the reason why I brought it forward to use all excess revenue from the Oneida Cooperative Governance Agreement that was not budgeted was because many of the items in the bond issue were directed towards the police department, which I support, but we're borrowing money on a long-term bond issue for things that will be breaking down within the 10 or 20-year bond cycle. And so my feelings was, instead of getting the city deeper and deeper into a financial hole for paying for things longer than we are getting any service out of them, it made sense to use all available revenue that we have from the cooperative governance agreement, which turns out to be $157,000 roughly, that the finance committee worked into a motion, which I support, but in addition to the rebranding dollars, which would be $100,000. So that's how this whole thing started. I don't want to use those funds to pay for things or that perhaps are more of a want than a need, and police equipment is a need. I know this is a little bit getting a little outside of the motion, but I'll kind of circle back. But the helmets that the police department requested for officer safety, the police cars, these are all things that we're going to be borrowing money for, and I'd much rather use the money that we're collecting through the cooperative governance agreement so we don't have to borrow. So the Alderman Galvin's suggestion, I mean, that's crime reduction, that's safety, that's a need. It wasn't in the bond issue, it was removed. And if we can use the funds from the cooperative governance agreement towards funding that, then I'm in support of that. But I am also in support of the motion on the table. Using the ARPA funds wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either, because then the excess money from the cooperative governance agreement could then go towards the other things that the police department are requesting in terms of equipment. So I'll support the motion, and we'll go from there. If it fails, then I'll look to support a different motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Weary?
Mr. Mayor, I support the motion. If you look later at the bonding request we have, there's easily $4 or $5 million in items that are going to last less than 10 years, and you know, the bonding issue's 10. And so the more we can whittle away at that and hopefully start putting that back into the budget, the better. And we have a lot of ARPA funds here, and I'm hoping, and I will make requests later, that we use more of that ARPA funding to lower the amount of bonding this year. So I'm in favor of this particular one. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Galvin, and then for a second time, Alder Scannell.
Thank you, Your Honor. And this is for Director Ellenbecker, because I've always wondered about buying police cars and helmets on bonding when, you know, the shelf life of a helmet is 5 years on warranty, and the cars, let's face it, the way they get used, you'd be lucky to get 5 years. Director Ellenbecker, how long is the bond that we take out for the cars or for the helmets? Are they for 10 years for a vehicle that we're only going to get for about 5?
Yes, the city has historically taken on a 10-year exempt note for police cars.
Okay, any chance we could get a 5-year bond on that?
Yes, we do certainly have options on note. You certainly have options. You can take out a 1-year note, 3, 5. I believe there's any option anywhere under 10. Yes.
Is that fiscally more? Is it better for the city to take out a 10-year bond on a car or to take out a 5-year bond on a squad car?
Fiscally, the shorter your borrowing is, the lower your rate. The flip side is you will have to pay it back sooner. So the amount that you have to use for how much levy dollars you'll need in over the next 5 years will be more than if you were to extend it out over 10 years.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, if we were to bond for 10 years, it would actually cost the taxpayers less because we wouldn't have to raise the levy as much to pay it off in 5 years. Is that, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I
That's not
followed
making
that,
sense
but,
to me.
again, if you take out a 5-year note, you know, you're really paying twice as much every year to pay that loan off over 5 years. You know, annually, you're gonna have more principal, but you're gonna have a little bit, less interest overall.
And just a note for all of us here, we're on the amendment.
I know,
So these kind of questions about bonding, we can certainly address with the bonding item too.
Makes sense. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you.
I think Alder Scannell is in the queue. No? So the,
What I want to talk about, and so we can wait for bonding.
Okay.
Got a smidgen more on it, but not much.
sounds good. So we do have the motion to amend from Alder Vanderleest, and that is to use ARPA resources for this purpose instead. All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
I think we might need to use the board on that one.
Thank you, Alders. You may vote. Thank you. Here's your displayed vote.
And that is defeated 9-3. So we have the Galvin amendment before us. That had a second. All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That amendment is successful. Entertain a motion.
As amended.
Motion to approve as amended has been made by Alder Dorf, seconded by Alder Scannell. Discussion on that. Alder Gerlach?
Question, because we're talking about numbers here. So now we're down to just discussing $7,192? No.
So 150,000 of the 157 has been set aside for this purpose of
Right.
rehabbing the Bearcat.
Right, we've already decided that.
Mhm.
So what is left is.
Well, that was the amendment.
Oh,
so we
now we're
need-
going to vote on that amendment.
Make the motion as the motion as amended is in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that item as amended has been adopted. On to item 9.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve made by Alder Dorf, seconded by Alder Scannell. Discussion on this item? I think it was pulled by Alder Brunette.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Listened to the finance meeting, and I see the committee took the recommendation from the administration and staff to reduce the bond issue nearly $6 million. There are quite a few things that were reduced, many things that remain. Kind of to Alder Galvin's point that there are some issues, there's some things in that bond issue that will be broken down within the 10-year bond issue if that's what we are looking to do. I would like to, it's sort of hard, and Attorney Bungart gave me a little framework here because I'm going to be making a request to be recognized to rescind the council's decision on the $100,000 for the rebranding initiative, but I would like to remove, with that purpose, remove 3 of the squad cars from the, well, I should say remove $100,000 from the police equipment of squad cars and officer helmets from the capital improvement or the bonding request.
Okay, so the amendment here is to simply remove those items from the CIP?
Yeah, remove
From
up
the
to
bond request.
we remove $100,000 of borrowing requirements between officer helmets and squad cars.
Clarification.
Alder Dorf?
Thank you. My clarification would be if the motion to rescind fails, and then that 100,000 isn't available, would that mean that the police department would not have those necessary items. And I'm asking that of Director Ellenbecker
And maybe Attorney Bungert.
or Attorney Bunger.
Alder Dorf, can you repeat the question?
The question would be, as I understand it, the request has been made to remove $100,000 of police equipment from the bonding because at a future point in this meeting, a motion to rescind the resolution to hold $100,000 for another purpose will be made. If that motion fails later in the meeting, and we've already passed this budget or this bonding, and the $100,000 is removed, does that mean that the police department will not get the necessary equipment that they need?
Anna, do you want me to
Yeah, maybe Attorney Bungert.
can take this one? So if I'm understanding correctly, it would take that funding for that equipment out of the request. However, if procedurally, if the motion to rescind fails, there can be a motion made tonight to reconsider the bonding request, and then that gets wiped clean and it could be rediscussed again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
A lot of tough ones tonight. Other thoughts or questions, Alder Brunette, for a second time?
Thank you, and I appreciate Alder Dorf asking that question because I know this whole thing is unorthodox, and I recognize the crystal balledness of the whole objective. We're basically looking to predict a future vote that's not yet happened. So I stand by the motion, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder.
I don't know if it was second, though. Was it?
Seconded by Alder Weary.
Thank
Alder
you.
Gerlach?
So to understand, you're asking me to vote to remove $100,000 worth of police equipment on the assumption that there's going to be another way of paying for it, but I won't know that until after I've voted to not pay for the police equipment in the bonding. I'm sorry, that's really how we do things? I don't understand.
I think it's a valid rhetorical question. Alder Scannell?
Yeah, this is highly unusual, but I'm going to support it because we can put it back in. So I want to make an informed decision on the rescinding. Right now, I don't support rescinding, but I want to have that debate and see where it goes. If it's successful, then things are as they should be, and if they're not, we can put that 100 back in tonight. So I see no harm in taking it out for the purpose of debating the rescinding, which would really, it's too bad we can't do that first. But we can't, so this is procedurally just awkward. But, so for purposes of, debate, I will support it now and hear what the arguments are for rescinding, which I don't quite follow, but I'll have got big ears, I'll be listening, and we can take it up and follow from that. So I will support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Other comments or questions? Alder Weary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do support it. It's just strange the way the rescind has to work. Ideally, this would have been brought up right before this entire committee had agenda items had rolled out. It's just awkward the way it's working out, unfortunately. Rescind's been used in the past, and I'm surprised it didn't come up at committee because it's not something that's never been heard of, so that's unfortunate. But I'm glad we found out a way to do that. So in essence, really what we're talking about is $100,000 worth of police equipment, 3 police cars basically. Do we want to bond for that, or do we want to take it on a future vote here about, take that money out of researching a rebranding initiative? Do we want to put $100,000 towards a rebranding initiative, or do we want to, buy some police equipment? And then that's that's basically what I'm looking at. And we can revisit it, as Alder Scannell said. So it's not like a final vote here, at least leaves our options open. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Galvin, and then Alder Dorf.
And I'm probably getting ahead of the things here, but.
Speak into your microphone.
Sorry. I'm probably getting ahead of things here, and if I am, I apologize, and I'll just shut her down till later on when it's appropriate. But if we're going to, rebranding, we've designated to hold $100,000, should we agree to do it? Now, we haven't had a presentation yet or anything else. Should we get the presentation and we think, nope, this thing is no good, we're not gonna approve it, we vote it down.
Point of order, I think
I'm
you
just,
are ahead of the cart.
if I'm at it, but I'm just asking, what happens to that $100,000 we've designated to set aside for it? Could that be applied to this police equipment, take it out of the bonding, would there be enough time? That's what I'm wondering.
So the question is for Director Ellenbecker. If that $100,000, whatever some of the options are for it might be, if that $100,000 is remaining after all these discussions have concluded, how might we be able to use that? Could we direct it towards bonding that's already been authorized, I think might be the question.
It's certainly, yeah, of course, we would prefer to, if possible tonight, move forward with bonding so that we can get the ball rolling on bonding, because it's still a long process to get the money. So whether or not it could be used toward that, yes, we could tweak it, and if it was to happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks, we could probably reduce the amount that we were going to borrow. Otherwise, if the money is that $100,000 is really returned, as in we decided not to spend the money, again, it is unbudgeted money from 2021. If we had no expenses that are allocated for it, it just rolls to the bottom line. It just increases our fund balance. So that's another option, is to let it roll to the bottom line.
Okay, thanks, Director.
Or if you have one other option, is again, you could really carry it over. You could create a different carryover request at a future date for something else that has come up, that some need that needs to come up. We could also apply it toward debt service.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think Alder Dorf and then Alder Gerlach.
Thank you. So I'm not going to support taking the police equipment out of the bonding at this point. And I also don't believe that this is a decision between rebranding and police cars, because that $100,000 is being held. It has not been assigned to anything. We have not voted to use that $100,000. So it's not a choice between police cars and helmets and rebranding. It simply is not. And we'll talk about that more later, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Gerlach and then Alder Brunette for a second time.
I have to say, I feel like I'm being held hostage. I truly am feeling that way, because you're asking me to take $100,000 of needed police equipment out of the bonding, and then you're saying, but wait, it might come back, and then when it's time to vote on whether or not to rescind a decision to rebrand, to hold that $100,000 for the possible rebranding project, then I'm being told, oh, but if you don't vote to rescind, what's going to happen to the police stuff? Now we gotcha. You see that? Does anybody understand why I feel like I'm being held hostage here? Let me say that again. You tell me to take the money away from the police because maybe you'll vote to rescind the rebranding effort. And then when it's time for me to vote to rescind the rebranding effort, you remind me, but the police aren't going to get their stuff if you don't vote to rescind. I really, really don't appreciate that.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Brunette?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And normally I don't, try to defend myself personally, but at the top of the meeting, if you recall, in all sincerity, I kind of laid this out, that I put forward an agenda item. I did make a motion to amend the agenda with the plan and the hope that by reordering the agenda that we could have avoided this. In good faith and in good effort and very sincere way, I did make that motion. Up until this agenda item and the one before it came up, then the attorney, said that I made a bit of a miscalculation, or I should have made a different motion. Mistakes happen. I get what Alder Gerlach is saying about the feelings of being held hostage, but I think I addressed that when I discussed this item the first time around. It's awkward. It wasn't my intent to make it awkward or to hold anyone hostage. One thing that I will like to correct, and I hope Alder Dorf doesn't take offense to this, but we are holding the money because the council made a motion to pass a resolution to hold the money, the $100,000 for the rebranding. So there is a motion on the table. That's why the rescission or the rescinding is necessary. It's awkward, it's quirky, it's just Robert's Rules of Order stuff and good and proper government. But again, there's no attempt to be, I'm a nice guy. I'm not a hostage taker. I assure you that much. But that's not my intent.
That's what they all say.
Yeah, yeah, secret life, I guess. But it's really not my intent. It's just quirky and awkward, and it is just what it is. But thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Scannell?
Yeah, if I understand Alder Dorf correctly, it's not, we're holding that money, but that if we decide not to rebrand, it's not like that money can't be used elsewhere. So it's not like this 100,000 is rebranding, period, nothing else. It's, we said we'll hold this aside for rebranding, we'll look that over, and we'll make a decision then, and if not, we may decide to go another way, or we may only use part of it, and then the rest would be used otherwise. I think that's the point Alder Dorf was making. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. All right, so we have an amendment to the bonding request to take $100,000 in requests from the police budget for equipment. That was made by Alder Brunette and seconded by Alder Weary. We will use the board.
Thank you, Alders. You may vote.
I don't know.
Alders Stoyer and LaFave. Thank you. Alder Stoyer, Alder LaFave. Thank you.
And that amendment fails 7-5. Additional comments on the bonding requests? Alder Weary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to delve into, because we had this discussion 2 weeks ago at council regarding the green infrastructure, and I think we had a pretty robust debate about it. You know, I think some thought maybe it was going to be removed from the bonding entirely, but that night I think the main point was that it wasn't going to be funded with ARPA dollars. I think the same arguments still apply here no matter how it's funded. If you look at removing the optional green infrastructure expense, and I'll go through those, and the reasoning would be due to high cost. If you look at the extra amount there is involved in doing these fancier streets, we can reallocate and do more work citywide in 2022. And so if you look at Elmore Street, for example, the extra cost there would be $980,000 instead of $916,000. That's 107% more. That's $980,000 we could use towards some of the streets that were removed, like School Place or Howard or Oakland. The same would apply for Roosevelt. It's an extra $360,000. That was a 23% more to do the over and above street. Eliza, $85,000. That's 26% more. South Van Buren 1, I'll call it, $570,000 more. That's a 56% increase. South Van Buren 2, a different stretch, $515,000. That's a total of $2.5 million in extra cost. It's 55% more. We're still going to do these streets. It's just we're paying 55% more over and above to do these streets that we don't have to do now. It might be a great idea to do them, but when we're cutting out other streets that really need to be done, or they wouldn't be on this list, we know how far behind we are in our streets. So to do these fancy streets, we're saying we're not going to do School Place, we're not going to do Howard Street, we're not going to do Oakland Avenue. I think we take out this money, we reallocate it towards these streets. And then I also noticed, speaking of one, I know I don't have any streets being rained down this year, but I do have a parking lot at Colburn being done off of 9th Street. Parts of it are basically rubble. It's a horrible parking lot. I've pestered staff on that for years to get it done because I get complaints up the wazoo with tires running over that, bikes and people walking over it. It's in really rough shape. Finally made it into the bonding, and I have to tell people that we can't do it because we're going to do these fancy streets. So I would just make a request to remove all the green infrastructure costs, and I believe the total's $2,510,000, and we can discuss if we want to lower bonding or reallocate it. That's my motion.
Alder Weary makes a motion to remove those projects from the bonding request.
Second.
Seconded by Alder Brunette. I was wondering if Director Grenier might be able to add some context to the discussion.
Certainly. Of the amount that Alder Weary has identified, if my numbers here are correct, about 890,000 of that would be levy-supported borrowing. The balance of that green infrastructure is being funded out of the stormwater utility, so that would reduce the stormwater-related bonding.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Alder Weary is correct in saying the money could be reallocated. I don't think all of it could be reallocated to road projects. Only the $890,000 worth of levy supported that had the pavement impact would be available for road projects.
Okay, thank you, Director Grenier. Alder Scannell, then Alder Galvin.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I posed this a couple of weeks ago when we got on this topic. I was a little punchy at the time. I don't think I spoke very eloquently. It's been, these projects have been described as, luxury items and not necessary. Green infrastructure is necessary. Anybody who thinks climate change is something we can put off anymore, I think is very short-sighted. This summer, a couple summers ago, fires in California turned our sun orange. We had air advisories about the pollution from the fires in Green Bay. We're seeing more flooding in our city. I think to just be looking right in front of us of what we can do in the immediate and not take actions that are going to be helping us prevent these catastrophic events is incredibly short-sighted. These infrastructure items should have been done decades ago. That's how far behind the ball we are. And to put them off again, where do we stop? When are we going to start picking up the ball and handling green infrastructure? It has to happen. You can't just keep putting, we're going to get to the point where it ain't going to matter. And then what? Climate change is here. We're running out of time. I don't know if anybody really understands the history of climate change. When did scientists first start bringing up the alarm that the climate was changing? 1890s. When was the first published paper on that it was caused by human activity? 1956. We have been way too lax on this issue. The world's on fire. The world's being flooded. And in other parts of the world, it's drying to a cinder. We're creating deserts. Lakes are dried up. Glaciers are melting. All this is abundantly evident. There's no doubt. And it's affecting us here in Green Bay. The flooding we're seeing. The air advisories from fires in California. Green infrastructure should have happened yesterday. And we didn't do it, so it needs to happen today, not tomorrow. I don't care how we pay for it. That's whatever the council wants to do. I thought ARPA funds would have been fine. You want to do ARPA funds, okay, let's bond. But it's got to get done. There's no tomorrow. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Galvin.
Honor. I would, I wouldn't want to go down in any of the neighborhoods in my district that have been flooded for the last several years and tell them that we're trying to do projects that will potentially prevent the flooding of their homes in the future, and tell them that these are luxury projects. If I could have taken you to that meeting at the high school, right after the last big set of flooding, and the angry, scared, frightened people that were there, worried about their life savings that they had sunk into their homes, washing away down the river, about how they were going to pay for it. I still have a constituent whose house is sitting on blocks yet as she tries to work her way through the insurance problems to get her basement rebuilt so she can live in her home again. She has not been in her home for over 2.5 years. And this is not a luxury item. This is something that unfortunately we're paying for the sins of people in the past who decided to lay cement and asphalt everywhere, fill in creeks and sloughs, and to put in drain pipes so that they're underwater instead of above water, costing the city a lot of money in pumps and other things, and those weren't considered luxury items, those were considered necessities. If not now, then when? I asked Alder Weary this last council meeting, 18 years. 18 years he's been on the council. Has he ever seen a time where he felt now was the time to start taking action to prevent these flooding in the future? I even had Alder Burnett was talking. In fact, you invoked my residents as being at risk of flooding. We have to take action. We have to take it now. Now is the time to do this. It's the right thing to do, and it's the right time to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Gerlach, then Alder Weary, Alder Johnson, every Alder.
I have a question for Director Grenier, please. These projects that Alder Weary is referring to as fancy streets, are these projects that would help with flood mitigation?
Again, I think that there might be a misconception as to what green infrastructure is intended to do. Green infrastructure, especially what we're talking about between biofiltration and pervious pavement, is more on the water quality aspect, and it handles what we refer to in the industry as first flush, which is where the bulk of the pollutants reside, that first initial rush of water that comes from a precipitation event. So they are more geared towards our meeting our MS4 permit, our municipal separate storm sewer system, the permit we have for stormwater discharge with the Department of Natural Resources, and by extension through the United States EPA and their total maximum daily load, or TMDL, requirements. So it's not necessarily for the catastrophic flood event, it's for the everyday rain event that carries the pollutants into our receiving stormwater receiving bodies. Again, the program we put together was put together based upon the directives that we were given by the Common Council, and that was to increase the numbers or the amount of street footage that we were intending to do, and to do it utilizing green infrastructure. So that's simply the program you see.
Okay, and if I can just follow up on that. So I think what I'm hearing is that these green infrastructure projects are meant to prevent pollution of the Fox River, which flows into Green Bay, which flows into Lake Michigan, which is part of the Great Lakes, which is 20% of the fresh water in the world, and we get our drinking water from Lake Michigan. So I stand corrected, this is not really flood mitigation, this is pollution prevention, which is also probably life-saving and important at this time.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Johnson, then Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Grenier, you had mentioned that it's been the directive of the council to incorporate green infrastructure. Can you just forgive me, because I don't recall when we did that? Could you just help me understand kind of what the context of that directive was?
And I don't have the dates either. I
I'm
do
not necessarily
remember
looking
having
for-
the conversations last year, and my recollection, if I'm wrong, by all means, let me know that I'm wrong.
Well, and I don't
But my
know. I just
recollect-
don't know the context of it.
My recollection was after discussion about the code audits, so it may go back even farther than a year. The hiring of Melissa Schmitz as a resiliency coordinator, her job description being focused on not only resiliency, but also green infrastructure. The decision to bring on an outside code audits and promoting of green infrastructure within our ordinance, the ordinance revisions that are forthcoming as a result of that code audit, and a general direction of the Common Council leaning towards green infrastructure.
Okay, so what I gather from that is that there was no specific action taken by council to direct the implementation of green infrastructure. There's just been
There
some
again,
decisions that have led to sort of that pattern.
Yes, I would concur with that. I am not aware necessarily of a committee action.
Okay, thank you. And you know, one thing I just want to be clear, like I'm not a climate change denier, but you know, so if I choose to vote against the green infrastructure, I want to be clear that it's no denial of that particular topic. But here we're talking about the need to implement this to prevent flooding, and yet it was just clarified by Director Grenier that this investment doesn't even address that particular issue. And I agree with Elder Galvin. I wouldn't want to be in his district having those conversations either. But I do know that in my district, I don't want to be having a conversation about spending $2.51 million on something for which was talked about at the last meeting as having no measurable impact, and we have no comprehensive strategy over how much it's going to cost long-term and what measurements or objectives we can achieve. And that is my biggest concern, I think, with this, because I do have streets in my district that are being taken out. It will be a subsequent motion for me to add those back in, quite frankly, regardless of the outcome of this decision. But my concern with any type of substantive spending with which this body engages itself, we ought to know what impact that funding is going to have and what our long-term objectives are. And I don't know that we've clearly identified that. If green infrastructure is a solution long-term, it's a lot easier to support that proposal when we know what it's going to do and how much it's going to cost and where our long-term funding strategy is to achieve those desired outcomes. But in the meantime, we have right in front of our faces streets and roads that we're taking off of this plan, that we know what it's going to cost to repair them, we know what it's going to cost to replace them, and we can do that right now, but we're removing them. And that is where I get hung up. So it would be my recommendation. I am going to support the motion. And again, it's not because I don't think we ought to do it ever, but I do think we really, as a council, as a community, I think it's incumbent on administration, on staff, to really educate us so that we're making wise, informed decisions about the impact of this level of funding. This isn't chump change. This isn't $100,000 branding money. This is pretty substantive, substantive spending right here without any idea what type of impact it's going to have. We know it's the first step, and that was explained to us clearly, I think, at the last meeting. You have to take the first step before you can get to the end goal, but I don't know what the end goal is. I don't think any of us do. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We have some people in the queue. Alder Weary, then Alder Brunette, Alder Dorf, Alder Stoyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alder Johnson spoke partly of what I was going to talk about, how there's no comprehensive study and objectives and cost. And I had mentioned that 2 weeks ago when we talked about the Sustainability Committee. While some of the goals definitely are laudable, we need to know what's the goal exactly and what's it going to cost. Otherwise, you have things showing up on bonding that never went through a committee. I can tell you as chair of I used to be protection welfare, improvement and services, that we didn't look at these roads. What's it going to cost? What's it going to do? Because if we had, we could have made a more informed decision ahead of time, and we would have known that these streets aren't meant to stop, help with air quality coming from California or help with flooding. we just heard that's not the case. And I think having that discussion would help people understand exactly what they're for. So the public needs to know these green infrastructure roads aren't going to help with the air quality. They're not going to help with flooding. They might help with some runoff. So those discussions need to happen in a comprehensive manner at committee, and we can set out a vision of what we want to do it, when we want to do it, in the cost, and we can all be on the same page. So it's not that really anybody's against maybe doing some of these streets. It's just you look at the cost impact. Holy cow, $2.5 million. And then you look at what we took out because of it. You got to tell people, you're not getting your street done, you're not getting your parking lot done, all these other things because of this project. And I think we just need to take a step back, still work on it, definitely, but this year, let's really work on those nuts and bolts things. So that's where I'm coming from. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Some fair questions in there. Director Grenier, I was just wondering if you might be able to speak. Obviously, you mentioned Melissa Schmitz and some of the work that she's doing, but one aspect of her work is related to the development of the resiliency plan. Was just wondering if you could speak to some of those efforts.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that Melissa, working with the Sustainability Commission, is undertaking at this point in time is a climate action plan, which includes a number of items that have come before committees and the council, ranging from energy usage to an item that Alder LaFave had before us a couple of months ago, relative to vehicle idling. I mean, the climate action plan that they're working on is that type of a comprehensive overview of a variety of different initiatives and what those impacts would be and the associated costs. So some of those planning efforts on different fronts have started through the Sustainability Commission and through Melissa's efforts. She does continue to work on programs and projects looking for funding assistance, seeking consensus and buy-in from affected neighbors on East River flooding issues. We continue to work with the East River Coalition. We're working with state and federal partners on actions that can be implemented not only along the Fox and East River, but along the south shore of the bay. So she's got her hands pretty full. I don't know that she's going to be in the best position at this point in time to drop all that and come up with a green infrastructure plan as well. But I think green infrastructure as a strategy does also play into that climate action plan that she's working on.
Thanks, Director.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's helpful just for alders to understand. Alder Burnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I hear a lot of anecdotal comments without any hard data or facts before me. I liken this to when the city of Green Bay decided to add $1.1 million of street trees to the stormwater utility bills. And that did not go to the Public or Improvement and Service Committee that was passed at a budget. And I remember holding up at that time, 3 years ago, the actual ordinance, the stormwater utility ordinance, which I think was like 34 pages long. And in that 34 pages, trees were mentioned no more than 2 or 3 times. We made a major policy decision and adjusted significant amounts of dollars towards stormwater bills without amending the ordinance properly. It took me after this last election to then get it before the Improvement and Service Committee, and the staff made the necessary changes to properly dictate or notate the effect trees, as they claim, affect stormwater utility, and adjusted our ordinance. I've been on Improvement and Services for nearly 4 years. Again, anecdotal conversations about, yeah, we support green infrastructure. That sounds like a good idea. Who wouldn't be in favor of resiliency? Of course, that sounds like a wonderful idea. All these anecdotal comments without anything of substance or hard motion or communication to approve something. We are going into possibly hundreds of thousands, if not a few $1 million of increased debt and increased stormwater utility bills in order to implement something that has not been officially and formally approved by this governing body as a comprehensive plan. And we have no idea what the measurable results are. I'm in favor of climate resilience, but right now, or I'm in favor of climate resilience and stormwater utility management and green infrastructure, but just the confusion at the council at this meeting as to what green infrastructure is tells me that our staff has not informed us properly through the proper processes, because some alders seem to think that green infrastructure will have an effect on flooding. Director Grenier just said that's not the primary purpose of green infrastructure. It's to improve stormwater management so pollutants don't go into the bays and the rivers. We need a comprehensive plan. This idea that we need to start somewhere, I don't know. I agree with that, but without a plan, how do we know what we're starting will actually bear any fruit whatsoever? We are taking significant projects off of the borrowing request in order to implement green infrastructure, in the city council through the INS committee and this full body. We don't have a comprehensive plan. Director Grenier, I want to really ask you that question again. Is there any policy, any motion that this body made, like a document that you can recall, for this governing body to commit to a comprehensive plan for green infrastructure over, say, several-year process?
As I've said before, I am not aware, nor do I recall specifically.
Okay. Again, the anecdotal comments were that you received direction from this committee or through this body, but just again, what I just heard is that you don't recall a specific action taken. So I'm not comfortable moving forward with this. We can look at green infrastructure as part of a long-term plan, that we have the figures in front of us so we can figure out if we reduce something here, we go there. One last question for Director Grenier. In all my research of green infrastructure and my conversations with city staff, green infrastructure right now, due to cost upcharges, carries a significantly high cost over great infrastructure to receive the same benefit. Is that correct?
I don't know, you cut out.
Green infrastructure, to implement green infrastructure, from comments that I've looked into this and I've talked to city staff. Green infrastructure currently, due to upcharges and the technology and other innovations, I've heard and read that it costs more to implement green infrastructure as compared to gray infrastructure. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's something that I've clearly elucidated since we started discussions about green infrastructure.
On average, say one of the road projects that are before the council for consideration just now, is Alderman Weary's calculations correct as regard to the upcharge for green infrastructure? Are those correct figures?
Yes.
Okay. To me, it's a pretty simple decision. I support green infrastructure, but we need a plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Stoyer, Alder Dorf, Alder Johnson.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to be.
Thank you, Alder Stoyer. I appreciate that. First, I just want to make a correction. We didn't at finance take those roads and projects out because of green infrastructure. We took them out because council gave us the directive that we needed to lower the amount we were bonding for. And that's how we lowered it. It really had nothing to do with green infrastructure. But I have a direct question for Director Grenier. So, Director Grenier, I'm giving you a moment to unmute yourself. Does green infrastructure have absolutely no impact on flooding? Or does it have some impact on flooding? I am very confused right now from what you said earlier.
I'll be honest with you, Alder, I'm at a loss how anyone could be confused with anything that I've been saying, and that includes Alder Burnett's earlier assertion that staff has been unclear about what we've been saying, because I've been saying the same message all along. There is a very minor, because the green infrastructure is intended to handle the first flush, so it's the very first precipitation that comes down. it is a very minor contribution towards flooding. If we're talking about eliminating 6 inches of street flooding, no, that's not what green infrastructure is for. Green infrastructure, by its nature, is primarily intended to reduce the pollutant loads in areas where we are not and cannot currently meet our MS4 and TMDL loads.
So without green infrastructure, we are not meeting the requirements of the law?
We will continue to be in non-full compliance with our permit. Now, while we're currently in non-compliance, as long as we can demonstrate that we continue to make efforts towards achieving compliance, we are in the good graces of DNR and the EPA. Should we not continue with efforts, good faith efforts, to continue to achieve compliance, that's when we will run into problems.
Well, I have a clear understanding now, and I'm going to continue to support this green infrastructure, and also to support the idea of at some point in the hopefully near future, getting a more comprehensive plan around green infrastructure. And I also understand that until we actually put some things in place in our city, we're not going to be able to get data, because you can't get data if you don't have the green infrastructure in place. And I thought there was a very good article in the Press Gazette that you contributed to, and you said you were talking about how the exact data, was it 70% more effective? Is it 80% more effective? There will be measurable data, and it will help us to meet the requirements of the DNR, to meet the requirements of the law. I think now is the time to begin green infrastructure. There hasn't been a good time in the past. I don't see a good time coming up anytime soon. I think now is the time that we need to start caring more about our environment and to do everything that we can to keep our water pure and to meet the requirements of the DNR. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Steuer and then Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Initially, when I was looking at all this, I was listening to what Alder Johnson and Alder Galvin said, because of the issues they had with flooding and that in their areas. And the green infrastructure, we're talking a little bit different than flooding per se. But I agree with Alder Burnett in the sense that we do need a plan. Plans often are made, sometimes they're followed, sometimes they're not, but I think it's important that we have something in place. I will suggest the council too, I didn't go to many of the sustainability meetings over time, but I did go to one recently, and I found it very interesting. I felt that, I got some input in there, and I learned some things. And I think what happens is, each of us alders, depending, we go to anywhere from 15 to 25 meetings a month. So it's a commitment, but I'm just saying that Sustainability Commission meets once a month. I think that we could learn a lot by going to those meetings and learning from that. I know I did. But like I said, I would feel more comfortable having a plan in place. I'm not sure how long that's going to take. But, I was looking at some of the green structures that they were talking about. When we were talking about Van Buren Street, for example, and a few others. I know you had to pick something to start with. But I think there's still some unsurety on council's part that, we have different anecdotal feels about all of this. But I'd like to see a plan in place. I feel that, green infrastructure is an important item. And I think, like Alder Scannell said, we got to do it yesterday. I'm feeling that if we can move forward in the next couple of months and really get something in place, I would be much more willing to support everything that they're asking for. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Grenier, something you said before just sort of piqued my interest, and I wrote it down, and several alders have since touched on it. But when we start to talk about, I think what everybody, I think most people here at least would want to see is some type of comprehensive plan on the impacts of GI and what does that look like long-term for the city. And you mentioned that a resiliency coordinator is just, her workload's too much right now to be able to take something like that on, but oftentimes we contract out consultants to do that type of work. And I know I'm kind of catching you flat-footed on this question, but do you have any sense like what that might cost to outsource a product like that, and would ARPA be a qualifying use of funds out of that $3 million bucket that we've created?
I am not an expert on ARPA, so regrettably, I'm not going to be able to make a comment on whether ARPA funding would be applicable in this. My gut feeling we are probably looking at contract services somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 300,000.
Okay. But it is something we could at least conduct an RFP, get some more tangible numbers on that, and I think it would help us with that long-term discussion. So, all right, thank you, Director Ganir.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alder. Any other comments or questions? Alder LaFave?
I just want to remind everybody that, and I think, and my neighborhood association also thanks, and almost half of my district thanks the city addressing flooding in my district. We spent, what was it, $1 million, close to $2 million for the dike. And that was a major undertaking. It was an expense, but it actually controlled the flooding. It made not just all the residents that live along the bay, but as I said, in '73, that flood, when there was no dike, it went all the way down to Eastman Avenue, so that was almost half of my district was flooded. So it was something major that had to be done, and I appreciate that. So when I look at this, I do believe in green infrastructure, and I think we got to start talking about it and doing something, but I'm looking at other areas in our city that are being flooded. And I think they need to come first, because this is people really being affected. Who was said that? Oh, Alder Galvin said the one lady still is not in her house. I mean, we have to step up and we have to help these people. So I really I want to see the stormwater and things that can really help the flooding in the city take place first.
Motion to open the floor for the vice chair of the sustainability.
Alder Dorf makes a motion to open the floor, seconded by Alder Stevens. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The floor is open. As a reminder, just state your full name and address for the council.
Hi, Ned Dorf, 1321 Emily Street, Green Bay. Appreciate the questions that are being asked by all the alders here. And I wanted to speak a piece about my own neighborhood. We encounter several flood events every year. Between the East River and the Fox River, a lot of pollutants are coming down the hills into both rivers. And green infrastructure is a very useful way of mitigating pollution and also slowing down runoff and reducing flooding. I would highly recommend that the council look at a report written by the EPA regarding the city of La Crosse and how they are using green infrastructure for both pollution control and flood control. And they do have some good data for anyone looking for some numbers. It sounds like, to me, if I were sitting in your position, I would want to see some numbers on that, on the exact types of GI efforts that we'd be using in the city. And instead of voting it down tonight, for those of you who have those concerns, I'd really hope that you can hold it over for another meeting, get some more data that you're looking for, but really, living in a neighborhood that deals with flooding all the time, I really want to see my city doing something about it and putting some resources toward flood control. I have had students in the neighborhood who have lost their homes. It's not, a laughing matter. It's not something that is going away anytime soon if we don't take action on it. So please take it seriously. Green infrastructure is not a pie in the sky, brand new kind of thing, but there are different ways to implement it. So, please get a good idea of what we're implementing, what that particular type of green infrastructure is doing, and if it doesn't meet your desires for flood control, let's look at a different type of green infrastructure that we can put in. But please don't vote this down tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, there's a question for Mr. Dorf, Alder Gerlach.
So I wonder, first of all, if the Sustainability Commission, you say we need more information. Can the Sustainability Commission help with providing that information if we were to hold this?
I mean, I can share studies that I've read. I think Steve, is obviously the expert when it comes to engineering. But I'm happy to provide any resources that I've come across. I'm sure there are other members of the Sustainability Commission or even Melissa who would be able to provide some more reading for the alders.
So, but you're recommending that we hold this?
I don't know if that's a possibility. If you have to pass the bonding tonight, then if you have any more specific questions for Director Grenier, please ask them, but let's not waste another year not doing these green infrastructure projects when we need to control our pollution and we need to start doing something to mitigate our flooding in the core part of our city.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Any other questions for our citizen, Alder LaFave?
You mentioned, was it La Crosse was doing this?
That's
And-
correct.
Yeah, and you said that they also found that it did help with flooding?
Yeah, yep, they've done some measurements over time. They've used bioretention, they've used permeable pavement. It's a pretty lengthy study, so it's about 50 pages long. But this is something that La Crosse has moved forward with.
It's too bad that we didn't have some of this before, to help us with this decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Any further questions for Mr. Dorf? Alder Weary?
Thank you. Hello, former Alderman Dorf.
Hello, current Alderman Weary.
I used to sit next to each other. I'm sure you would agree that your testimony is excellent, but we really would need a full presentation from experts to a standing committee to really make a fully informed decision. I appreciate your information, but I think you would agree that would be a better route to go, so we'd have all of the information.
I agree. I think you need to ask as many questions to get as much detail as you need before you vote on it.
And that's,
if you're curious about what the GI projects actually are, I think this is the time to ask Steve.
I appreciate it, former Alderdorf. I appreciate you coming to meeting, tonight and staying up a little bit. You got young kids, so I appreciate it. But we do need more of a in-depth look at a committee from experts on this. And I know you mentioned flooding, and we heard from our director that this really negligibly affects that. And so if we wanted to look at flooding, we would want presentations of things that would affect that. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Ned.
Thank you.
So, are there any other questions for our resident? Alder Johnson?
Yeah, maybe more just a comment. Thank you as well, Ned, for being here. And I did find this report. I'll be sure to share it with council. It is 48 pages, as you alluded to. This looks like lighter reading than the 1,000 pages of fluoride that we received. So thanks for pointing this out. It looks like there's a lot of good content in here.
Absolutely.
So, are there any others? Entertain a motion. Motion to close the floor made by Alder Dorf, seconded by Alder Gerlach. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The floor is closed. So we do have a motion and a second to remove the green infrastructure projects from the 2022 bonding request. Alder Scannell, I think, had a comment.
Just a question for Director Grenier. Is it with this green infrastructure that when you say it doesn't mitigate flooding or a lot of flooding, is it that there's not enough data to determine that? And that's something we can acquire as this green infrastructure is put in, or is that something that is known from other municipalities using this?
That is known. The primary difference between La Crosse and City of Green Bay is La Crosse sits on a large sand plain. So when they do bioinfiltration, it's infiltration all the way back down to the groundwater aquifer. Whereas in Green Bay, we are in a clay environment. So we have bioinfiltration, which is temporarily going to slow down the water, filter that water, the pollutants, but ultimately it needs to get into our storm sewer system. So there's only a finite amount of storage capacity within that biofiltration or within the permeable pavement until the time that that gets overloaded by water and cannot absorb. The next water in physically has to push the oldest water out. That's why I'm saying it doesn't have the flooding reduction impact. It's only so big. If I want to reduce flooding in a clay environment, I have to dig a big hole in the ground, which is a pond. We can't build those ponds in urban environments in a neighborhood. If we could, they're lower cost investment than green infrastructure, and we probably would have suggested that in the first place.
And just one other question. Oh, damn, I should have wrote it down. Do you see going forward that our roads are going to be more and more constructed in this fashion to meet green infrastructure needs of the future?
I can't make that analysis because I don't have a policy commitment on behalf of council to drive that.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Gerlach?
Can this be held, or does this have to be approved tonight?
I would go to Director Ellenbecker on that, just to lay out, some of the priorities that we need to hit with the bonding.
There is absolutely no drop dead date reason to have it done tonight. What that does is if we do not continue to move the bonding forward, whether it's this week or 2 weeks from now, that just pushes back some projects, and any of these items that are on the bonding list, it just pushes back the bids going out on the street. It potentially could postpone a project that's on the list if we get too late into the season and maybe they can't get a bid. And that's where I'd have to ask like Director Grenier or the Parks Director or Assistant Park Director to talk to those items. But again, it doesn't have to be done tonight, but there's items that potentially could get pushed back, and there might be a chance that something may not be able to get completed in 2022 the longer we wait and for the bonding.
Thanks, Director. Alder Dorf?
Yes, thank you. I think we should make every effort to do this tonight. Of course, I would love to have people have some more time to think about the green infrastructure, but I would not want to see our roads and our park work not get done because we came in too late to try to get the construction workers and to try to get the bids in. I think it's very important, and we talked about this at Finance, that this bonding be voted upon tonight. So I would really encourage us to look at it that way. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Galvin, then Alder Stoyer.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is for Director Grenier. You mentioned that the city is tiptoeing around compliance with the DNR and its expectations for us to be cleaning up pollution and that. First I've heard of this. How much tiptoeing are we doing? How close are we to being in violation? What happens if we are in violation? Do they slap our wrist, or do we have to pay fines, or do we lose funding for things? Could you go into that?
I would not characterize it as tiptoeing. I would say we are very much front and center with DNR, being very upfront about what we are and are not doing.
So
we have to do that. We have to do that every time that we go through our permit cycle. So I would not say that we're tiptoeing, not by any stretch of the imagination. Everything we're doing is with clear knowledge of the Department of Natural Resources. Every year we submit a MS4 update that does go through committee, is voted on by the committee, and then ultimately comes to council for approval. And that's what that MS4 document entails, is what efforts we have been doing and how successful we are, what our current status is. So the DNR has established what their targets are for us to hit, and we report back to them how close we are to hitting those targets. And again, as long as we continue to make investment, as long as we continue to make good faith efforts to improve the condition and find ways to getting closer to making that total number, then the DNR is happy with us. If we simply throw up our hands and say, it's a built environment, there's not a whole lot more we can do, we've done the best we can and we're walking away, that's where we will wind up in trouble. And in this case, trouble looks like big fines. Think on the order of $10,000 per day.
Okay, and have we ever come close to big fines?
Not at this point, because we continue to make efforts moving forward.
So if we can the projects that Alder Weary is talking about, would we be putting ourselves in jeopardy, or do we have enough other projects ongoing that the DNR will be happy with us?
I wouldn't want to put myself into the mind of a DNR regulator evaluating that.
Very few people would, but based on your experience, the current projects that we have going forward, other than the projects in question right now, would we be in compliance or close enough to compliance that the DNR would let it, nothing would happen?
I think immediately for 2022, we would be okay. I think if DNR sees that as a trend where Green Bay is giving up in their urbanized environment, I think that would be problematic.
But there's nothing you can give us in black and white numbers, or X amount has to be done every year, or you're going to be in trouble. I mean, there's nothing like that you can give us, so we know if we're getting near the mark or we're skirting with trouble.
I can't give it to you because no such data exists.
Sounds like government. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Director. I appreciate your candid answers.
Somebody else was in the queue. Alder Stoyer and Alder Weary.
Thank you, Your Honor. So if we vote this down tonight, is my understanding that we would wait till next year's bonds cycle to do this? There wouldn't be anything in between that we could look at? It's either tonight or nothing? Is that my understanding?
Mm-hmm, correct. In terms of these large-scale projects, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Alder Weary.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say here on a positive note, and I think Director Grenier would hopefully agree, we are doing a very large-scale project, the Seymour Park Stormwater Pond East, $2 million. That's a really hefty project, and if you read the description of it that was provided to us, it will decrease flooding in the local area and improve water quality. So I would say, we can point to that and say, look, we are putting a pretty hefty investment in this, and we'll continue to do it. We just want to study what's going to be the most effective. So I think we are putting some good faith effort to it, and I think it's time to vote. Thanks.
Any other comments? All right, we have a motion and a second to remove green infrastructure projects from the 2022 revised bonding request. A request has been made to use the board, and we will do it.
So if we vote yes, it means to remove.
Correct. An aye vote removes green infrastructure from the bond request.
There we go. Thank you, Alders. You may vote.
And that motion succeeds 7-5. Any other motions? Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, I talked about how a couple of streets that were removed that were roughly equivalent to the amount of levy-supported borrowing that we were anticipating from GI, and recognizing now that this body has supported the removal of that, and of course, this body could say, hey, we're either going to experience savings, recognizing that we are still coming in below that targeted objective or targeted goal that we set for the Finance Committee, or we can replace some streets that, as we've all heard our community screaming that they would like to see. So with that, I am going to make a motion that we add back the $815,000 for School Place, Howard Street, and Oakland Avenue.
A motion has been made to restore the projects that Alder Johnson has listed. It was seconded by Alder Weary. It looks like Director Grenier has his hand raised.
Thanks, Mayor. While you may wish to go ahead and put those projects back in, and I'm not going to try to dissuade you from doing it, what I am going to tell you is those projects will not be constructed in 2022, even if you put them back into the bond issue at this time. The reason for that is those three projects are tied to the Seymour Park West stormwater pond, and until we get, they have to go at the same time as that pond. And until we get consensus and design on that pond, which has been delayed due to the meeting with the public and getting public input, we can't build the streets because they have no place to discharge their water, and we can't build the pond ahead of the streets because the pond has no way to get filled. So those projects go together at this point.
Okay, and I appreciate that explanation, Director Grenier. In fact, I anticipated that that might be the case. And when I was looking at page 5 in the capital improvement plan, Seymour Park West, I believe, was removed for $3.5 million. And so I just want to understand, we're still proceeding with the east side of the park, but the west is what's still being designed, and that's what would impact those streets?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Recognizing that, Mayor, I'm okay that we had the public conversation. I'll rescind my motion.
Okay, thanks, Alder. Alder Weary?
Mr. Mayor, I had alluded to this earlier regarding Colburn Park, and parks, of course, is always the bottom of the barrel, scraping for money, projects to get done. And I see that a project came in kind of the last hour and bumped Colburn out, which is fine. You know, there's timing on things, and that's understandable. Colburn Park, the 9th Street parking lot, is $200,000. It's over 30 years old, and as I mentioned, in rotten shape. People probably shouldn't be parking in there at all. You know, they're falling on it on some of the holes and wrecking their tires. So I would make a motion to put this back in. It's long overdue.
Second. Motion has been made to restore the Colburn Park parking lot resurfacing project, seconded by Alder Johnson. Any further discussion? Alder Scannell?
I will support the rubble rouser for $2,000. Wasn't it that what you said?
A little more expensive.
200. Well, I missed some zeros. I'll still support it, but
Maybe a small parking lot for 2,000.
no.
Thank you. Thank you. Alder, any additional comments on this motion? Alder Dorf?
So we're looking at a parking lot, and we've spent an hour talking about flooding. Were there any projects, I guess, on that list, Director Grenier, that would have more to do with preventing flooding? Where I don't want to just, race into substituting one thing for another. I want to make a decision with some time to think about it. So, Director Grenier, what are some projects that might have more of an impact on reducing flooding?
The projects that were removed from the Department of Public Works Capital Improvement Program, there are no direct flood impact projects in that list.
What projects then, are there any projects that you think are a priority for the city? Any roads that are a priority for the city?
I think every road project we bring forward is a priority. I also think the hydraulics, replacement of the hydraulic system in the Main Street Bridge continues to be a priority.
Okay, any other questions? Alder Galvin, then Alder Weary. And then just a reminder, this is on Colburn Street parking, or Colburn Park parking lot.
I understand we've already bonded and spent over $7 million on that park just a few years past to rebuild the entire pool for those people that live out there. And now we're going to put $200,000 into the parking lot, and yet we look at the Nitschke Bridge, which sits with one hydraulic working and one not, and we're waiting for that to go out. We have $815,000 here. I'm just wondering if that might be better spent repairing a bridge that we're waiting to fail one more time in the near future. And if that does, if the hydraulics goes, from what we've been told, that would be a catastrophic failure and require that bridge to be closed for quite some time. Is there any way that bridge could be repaired for less than $1 million?
Director?
We don't know that at this time. The $1 million is the best estimate we have. We have that out for design. We're waiting for that design information to come back from our consultant at this time.
And how long do you anticipate that taking?
Within the next several weeks.
I would make a motion that we hold the bonding of that amount of money of $815,000 to see what the consultant comes back with in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think we should probably dispense with
The other
the
one?
Colburn parking,
All right.
Colburn parking lot project. Any more comments on Colburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would not be on this list if it weren't a top priority. Yes, Colburn's pool was replaced. The 50-year pool that was there was replaced for the entire city. It wasn't for that neighborhood. And yes, there was other work done, but it's a park that serves a very large area of the west side. As we know, Alder Burnett really doesn't have any parks, so a lot of his constituents come over to Colburn. So it serves a vast area. It's really, if you look at the project cost, it's not a large one. I'm sure if we asked Diana Ellebecker, our director, possibly we could use ARPA funds for this if we want to offset it with some one-time money. Perhaps, Director, could you comment to that?
Director Ellenbecker?
Your question is whether or not ARPA money could be used for a parking lot.
Right.
Again, that would not be a qualified expenditure within ARPA. However, there is that $10 million bucket or allocation that is for one-time expenditures that is considered lost revenue. That is pretty wide open whether or not you could spend it on a parking lot. Again, it would be a one-time expenditure.
Okay, appreciate it. Then, if it's all right with whoever seconded it, I'll amend it to state that that's where the funding would come from. So
Okay.
we would not be borrowing more for it. We would be using some of the federal money we received. Thanks.
Alder Weary amends his motion, changes his motion to offer up $200,000 in the lost revenue calculation through ARPA to fund this parking lot reconstruction.
I'll second that if it's allowed.
Seconded by Alder Brunette. And just a comment about, I've done the same thing as Director Ellenbecker did, which is to say that $10 million. It's not $10 million anymore. So I just want council to be cognizant of the fact that we have spent it down with $655,000 in the last budget, and we are already proposing $1.8 million, if my memory serves, in the bonding request right now. So that takes it up to 2.6 million spent, and I might be missing some other things in there. Alder Brunette?
Yeah, thank you. I obviously support the motion. I made the second. That I'm very familiar with that park. I lived close to that park for many years, and what's unique about Colburn Park is on the west side of Green Bay, there's not many hallmark recreational facilities. It's just the way that the city developed over the years. West of Packerland, there are only very few parks, and that park at Colburn is a magnet for people on the entire west side, as well as people throughout the entire city because of the pool, as well as people from outside of the community because of its vicinity to Lambeau Field and the Titletown development. At any given time in that park, you're going to have hundreds, I'm not going to say thousands, that's dramatic, but you have a lot of visitors, and that is a hallmark, landmark recreational facility. You have swimming, you have cross-country meets for the high schools, you have basketball. We're investing in the baseball fields, the concessions, the community support of that park is incredible. And the reason why this parking lot on 9th Street is really important for us to repair, and again, we can make the argument that it can wait, and, you know, I've done that myself on some of these projects, but people who utilize that park all over that park. There are several entrances and several parking lots. There's Locke Avenue, there's off of Fisk and Shirley, and of course, this parking lot off of 9th. The parking lot off of 9th is as close to Lambeau Field as that entire park could be. And so I think, you know, as we talk about rebranding and, you know, positioning our city and presenting our best self, we have people from all over the west side, the east side, and people who are coming visit to our city to enter that wonderful, beautiful park that we're investing a lot of resources in and drive over, as Alder Weary said, basically rubble. It does not lend Green Bay a very good name in how we maintain a real institution on that west side. You know, the east side, you east siders, you have, you know, Bay Beach and the Wildlife Sanctuary and Joanne's and Resch, and on the west side, we don't have those sorts of amenities, so I support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Scannell?
The item is bonding, not spending ARPA funds. So,
Just allow Alder Scannell to
yeah,
finish.
I think maybe we should just, we're doing kind of committee work. Now that I think of it, I would rather, I mean, we got time on this. They're not going to make the parking lot tomorrow. It's going to take time, but, well, for bonding we don't, but for ARPA funds we do. And I would really like to see if we couldn't use some green infrastructure with the parking. There are paving materials that are more green than others, and I certainly would be very supportive of turning that parking lot into, so everyone coming into Green Bay could see the green infrastructure we're implementing into our parks. So I believe this is out of order as far as using ARPA funds.
I'm not sure if it is out of order necessarily, but I had a question for Director Ellenbecker, which is that, and I think this was asked earlier in the meeting, you know, what kind of a time lag do we have here between approving the requests included in the 2022 bond and then potentially supplementing that request with ARPA, for example, instead of borrowing for the amount?
I kind of missed part of your question. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, I was just curious what kind of a time lag we have between authorizing the bonding request tonight and potentially substituting some of the bonding authorized with ARPA resources, if that's the route that people choose to go.
Okay, yes, I did look up, and a traditional or a typical bonding cycle takes almost 3 months from the time we have an initial decision how much we're going to move forward for bonding. Then we bring the initial resolution through. We finally get to the final closing resolutions, and then by the time we finally receive the money, it's about a 3-month period. I know that's not quite your question, but that's how long a typical bonding cycle would last. So if, let's say, we were to have a draft list of items that was approved tonight. So we have the list, we've added, subtracted things. At this point, my next step then is to forward it to our financial advisor. It takes them 2 to 4 weeks to go through, and our bond counsel, they go through and they decide what statute, per the state statute, can you go out for a 20-year bonding? Can you go out for a note? How long would they recommend you go out for? So they come back, and it would probably take, like I said, 1 to 2 finance committee meetings by the time they would come back, give me information for me to bring back to the finance committee with an initial resolution. So that could keep moving our bond forward. Anywhere along that line, anytime during that process, it can be revised, especially if it was to be a reduction or an add, either one. Reduction is easier to take off the list than to get the experts to tell us again how it would fit in our bonding request. But anywhere along the line, probably in the next month, you can still modify the list. Or again, at any point, we can slow down the bonding request. But if you had the list tonight of what items are still in it, I could start moving it forward and working with our financial advisors and our bond counsel, and it can still be revised over the next month.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. Alder, where do you still have the floor?
Yeah, I would say just using some of the other projects like the stormwater infrastructure that we're doing at Seymour, and I think we're doing about half from the ARPA funds. So I would, if it's all right with the seconder, make it half. 100,000 that we're borrowing, 100,000 from federal. That way it's a match similar to what we're doing on other projects. Thanks.
Okay, so Alder Weary makes the motion to provide $100,000 in ARPA resources from the revenue loss calculation, and that was? Seconded by Alder Brunette. Alder Vanderleest and a few others.
Thank you, Mayor. I represent the park on the county level. It's a very busy park. They just put in some new ball diamonds and things. The park is used on both the 5th Street area and 9th Street area. I think that taking the full 200,000 from the ARPA funds, it's not that much. I think that would be save a lot of red tape. Just take the money right from the ARPA funds. I'd ask Alder Weary to reconsider the 200 right from the ARPA funds. And, you know, we've done other things on the east side with bathrooms and what have you. And this park is heavily used, and the parking lot would be a real fine addition. So that would be my request. Thank you.
Since you represent the county, maybe we could get half from the county.
Well, I'd
What do you
like
think?
to take all the
Make
funds.
that motion?
Well, the county is doing a lot of good things.
I believe it. Alder LaFave.
I was gonna ask, would it be appropriate to leave this out and then to bring it, would it go to the park committee to make requests to use ARPA funds for this 200,000 paving? Would that be appropriate? And then, but also then, Director Grenier, would that delay the actual project being done for this year?
Well, I can't speak for anybody else. We are rapidly approaching a point where, as Director Ellenbecker indicated, the first step in the process is the council approving a bond request. I consider after that action, the additional actions that Director Ellenbecker has talked about relative to the actual issuance of bonds and the resolutions and ultimately the issuance of bonds are largely procedural, because once the council's taken the action to approve the bond request, the rest is mechanics. Now, obviously, there's always an opportunity that could change, but historically, based on how the council has operated, that has largely been procedural at that point. Once we have a commitment on behalf of the Common Council to go forward with a bond request, I've traditionally had comfort enough that we can start releasing projects for bid. Until we actually have a bond request approved, at least for the projects that are requested by Department of Public Works, I can't bid projects out because I don't have a commitment to fund them. I need to actually have cash in hand by June to start paying contractors if I were to start bidding projects right now. If I don't start bidding projects within the next couple of weeks, because of how we started to structure the contracts, making them larger, trying to do larger amounts of street, we are in real danger of not being able to finish those projects in 2022.
So you're saying that it could be that this pavement for Corbin Pool, excuse me, it's hard to talk with my mask, it would be delayed for this year.
I'm not speaking for any other department who's involved in the bond issue. I am speaking 100% and solely on behalf of DPW projects.
Now, I'm asking about using ARPA funds, not bonding.
The way that the ARPA funds have been handled to date, they've been under separate requests that goes to Finance Committee for every individual project.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm trying to figure out, so that would delay this project, wouldn't it?
I mean, I think just kind of summarizing what Director Ellenbecker has said, I think identifying the projects that we're supportive of is the most important thing to do tonight. Some of the funding questions, can be figured out with a little bit more time.
Okay.
Alder Gerlach, then Alder Corpus Dax.
Just trying to get my bearings here. We are on item 9 to approve the 2022 revised bonding request, right?
Yep.
Okay, did Alder Weary make a formal motion to put Coburn Park parking lot into? And
Yeah.
so is he
And
now
fund it
withdraw-
partially, fund half of it with ARPA is his latest motion.
Okay. And so are we authorized to stop at this point and make decisions about ARPA funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's an acceptable motion.
Okay.
Alder Corpus Dax?
Thank you, Mayor. As of right now, I'm not going to support this motion. If we want to use ARPA funds, I'd like to see that go through committee as the other ARPA fund projects have gone through, so that we can have that discussion and we know what we're looking at for, what the amount that's being asked for and what we have left in the different buckets of ARPA funds. I think if we're going to take this money and put it anywhere, I'd rather see it put towards the Nitschke Bridge, which I think affects a lot more citizens, residents on a daily basis than a parking lot in a park.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I support the inclusion of this in the capital improvement plan. Obviously, the question is, how do you fund it? I'd rather see it funded through the bond request, because I do question whether or not that this is legally noticed in a way that we could apply ARPA, at least through a motion today. But more importantly, I think, Mayor, just a question directly for you, because some ARPA proposals have come forward. I'm sure that your staff has talked about many others. And so could you talk a little bit to that particular bucket and how this might impact some other projects that I'm sure you've aggregated with feedback from the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think just with respect to the revenue loss calculation, the way that, generally speaking, I've looked at it and we've looked at it is a way to smooth out some of the bonding requests that are coming in the future, as well as, just account for some one-time spending requests that might come up. There are also, Bay Beach was a large part of the reason that we had the revenue loss calculation that we did. So just as a matter of, equity, I think we need to take into account some of their needs. So it's, not a super specific answer, but I'm just reticent to charge forward with a lot of ARPA spending out of the that original number of $10 million, because obviously we have a lot of needs, and that's the most flexible pool of funding that we have.
Yeah, and that's kind of where my brain was at on this, and why I said what I said about the earlier conversation as well. And so I am going to offer it up as an amendment, because I do support funding this project in the bond, and even though Alder Weary's proposed to split the funding source, I'm just going to offer up an amendment that all of the funding come through the bond request.
Okay. Alder Johnson makes a motion to fund the Colburn Park parking lot project with bonding entirely, seconded by Alder Stoyer. Discussion on that amendment to Alder Weary's motion.
Make it quick.
Seeing none, all in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. That amendment is successful. I entertain a motion on the amended motion. Motion to approve is amended, made by Alder Weary, seconded by Alder Stoyer. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it, and that amendment is approved. Other items to discuss with respect to the bonding request? Alder Galvin?
Well, so now we're taking 200,000 out of the, sorry. So we're proposing we just approved to take $200,000 out of that savings of roughly $850,000. I'm looking at a couple of other big-ticket items here that I think we could put that money towards. There's a request from the PD for $307,000 for a body cam, taser, car camera software. I'm not sure how they plan on paying for that without the bonding. And we all pretty much have agreed that
Just one sec, on body cams and tasers?
Yes.
That's funded with ARPA.
So we're going with ARPA
according
on
to
that?
committee action.
Okay, I'm sorry. Nope, you're right. All right, and then I was also looking at the engine remount for the fire department, which is being delayed right now till 2023, and we know how those delays go, just like we have done with the Nitschke Bridge. I think this is the third or fourth year we've delayed fixing that hydraulics. But with the 200,000 going to the parking lot, we're certainly not gonna have enough, even if the bids come in much lower. So I would make a motion that we cover the engine remount for the fire department for $460,000.
Okay, Alder Galvin makes a motion to fund that engine remount that was proposed to be delayed. That was seconded by Alder Dorf. Discussion on that item. Alder Vanderleest?
Thank you. I don't know if the chief is on our video or not, if he could comment about why they were waiting for that period of time.
I am not sure if he's on the line.
Is that a one-time fix that they could use the ARPA money to do that for $460,000 rather than bond for it this time?
I mean, that gets us into the same conversation that we've had about some of these other
And
projects.
they
It's
could use the
possible,
ARPA, they could use the ARPA money for that then? That'd be my recommendation, be my thoughts.
Is there a second? Alder Johnson?
Recognizing that Chief Litton at least doesn't seem to be immediately accessible, I'm just curious, Alder Galvin, do you know if that would be the highest priority within the fire department, perhaps, versus some of these other requests that were next?
Yeah, I can jump in, or Alder Dorf
Sure.
too, if. Alder Dorf?
I believe it is, because finance, I asked them to remove some things, because council wanted us to get that down, and that's what he picked. He wasn't very happy about it, and I've gotten an email from him that says that, you know, it has to get done, and it has to get ordered. So it would be something I believe he really wants, based on his communication with me. Mayor, do you know anything
Yeah, and
different?
I would just reiterate that, and that it would be in the 2024 request.
Okay.
If we don't fund it here.
Okay, and that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Any other, Alder Sawyer?
Point, Mayor, I just was wondering how long this has been, we've looked at this over a number of years, this particular project with the fire department. How long have we delayed it over time?
The engine remount work?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's probably it's been a while, I just don't recall.
Yeah, I don't know if Director Ellenbecker has any answer on that. I do not.
And it's fine, if it's been a number of years, you know, I guess that's all I'm looking for.
I can only speak to what the chief had mentioned to us on an earlier point. He had asked for new engines, and then when we came back and asked for recommendations for reductions, he was able to, instead of take a new engine, he was able to have two replacements or these remounts. And the reason why he was willing to postpone this one is that when he's getting this one remount quoted out and ordered, he is working to get the second one ordered at the same time, with the expectation that when we go through for the 2023 bonding, that money will be there. So he's basically placing an order for that next engine now, knowing, I can't remember if he said a 12 to 16 month lead time. I can't quite remember, 18. I can't remember exactly how many month lead time he had said. So he had just really delayed it with the expectation that it's going to come around for the next bonding request.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah,
that's
that does.
what Chief Litton had mentioned.
Yep.
I thought it was like 18 months, maybe, yeah. Okay, I'm good with that, thank you.
Okay. So a motion and a second by Alder Galvin to fund the engine remount for the fire department. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes have it, and that amendment is successful. Any others? I don't know if Director Ellenbecker, if you've been keeping a tally. Can you let us know where we're at?
Sure, yes. So the reductions that were recommended was $890,000 from the general fund for the GI infrastructure. There was also a $1,620,000 reduction from storm for the same GI infrastructure. And if Director Kinnear, if that doesn't sound correct, please correct me. And then since then, we have added back $200,000 for the Colburn parking lot and $460,000 for the fire engine remount. At this point, that's still netted a reduction of a total of $1,850,000. But on the levy side, that is we went from $13,695,411 down to $13,465,411. So a reduction of $230,000 from the revised number that was brought back from the Finance Committee meeting.
Thanks, Director.
I move that we just stop here and-
Alder Dorf,
I'd like to move that we stop here and just to approve that
motion to approve as amended.
less rate, yeah.
Alder Dorf makes a motion to approve the 2022 bonding request with all the changes made here this evening, seconded by Alder Galvin. Additional comments or questions? Request has been made to use the board on the approval of the bonding request with those changes made.
Alder Dorf, how would you like to be recorded? Thank you.
And that is adopted 10-2. On to report of the Personnel Committee.
Can I speak? Request to speak.
Alder Brunette.
Attorney Bunker, please direct me if I'm out of line. I need a little assistance here. But I'd like to put a motion on the floor to rescind the council's action from December 7, 2021 to move forward with RFP for the City of Green Bay's branding initiative and to hold on the funding resolution.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Johnson. Attorney Bunker, could you just explain the impact of this this motion, what it would mean for everybody?
Sure. So a motion to rescind operates similarly to a motion to reconsider, except there's no timing requirement for it. And there are some other procedural aspects, such as the notice that was given with the call of the meeting, which is the agenda, that provides that a motion to rescind an item as specifically stated as Alder Burnett it acts like a regular motion. So there is a motion, a second, there can be debate. There's limit as to how much it can be amended because of the fact that notice has been given. So if we go into that realm, I can dig into that further. But essentially it can be passed with a simple majority. And its effectiveness is like a motion to reconsider, in that it basically just erases what the council did as far as their action with respect to approving moving forward with the RFP and holding the funding resolution. And so then that item, my understanding was that it originated in finance. The finance recommendation was to approve the funding resolution. Then that item was amended at council to hold the funding resolution, but proceed with the RFP. So if council votes to rescind, then that item would come back to council, under the Finance Committee report as it was originally reported out, and then council would then have another opportunity to act on that item.
Okay, thank you for that.
If I could.
Alder Burnett.
Yes, I want to explain to the council the reason why I'm bringing this forward this motion, and obviously why I support it. There's no denying the fact that the rebranding discussion from a few months ago was, a split decision of the council. I think it might have passed 9-3. And, normally I wouldn't push so hard to reverse something, but, and the action of rescind is a rather dramatic motion. I know that. But shortly after we approved that in November or December, I then put forward a communication that ended up passing through the Finance Committee to take all the excess Oneida dollars and hold it in contingency, so that as we realize what was in need throughout the city, that we would have those funds held. And I believe that passed the Finance Committee, and it ended up passing the council on a voice vote or a committee, adoption of a committee report. And so that's a good thing. And then, of course, the bond issue came out, and the bond issue was significantly higher, and the council did their due diligence along with the mayor's office and the department heads to reduce that, and we just voted for it. The reason I voted against it is I truly believe that we have an issue with some of the things we're borrowing for items like helmets and police cars, which I very much support, but we're making a bad financial decision when we're borrowing money potentially on a 10-year note for things that will expire in 3 to 5 years. So I did my due diligence like any alderperson should, and I reached out to Director Ellenbecker, and at that time, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, she had mentioned that the city had not moved forward with the RFP, or at least did not release it for bid. She also told me, and I'm not trying, this isn't meant to be any criticism whatsoever, so please do not misconstrue any of these comments. She also said that the city year-end financial picture would not be known until some point in February. So we don't even know how the city's finances were ending, the year ending 2021. So it's all a bunch of timing, it's a bunch of concerns, and so what I figured to reduce the bonding, why don't we use the $100,000 since a RFP had not been proposed yet, had not been released yet, and why don't we use that money for things the city truly needs? Also, part of that motion I attempted to get before the Finance Committee last week was that bond rebranding was not going to be a dead issue. It would simply be part of the November budget process. So I know my motion seemed really straightforward. I was a little surprised at the conversation at the Finance Committee. It was basically null and void for a procedural issue, and then Alderman Weary, looked into it like a good alderman should, and he proposed an option, and I was kind of on the fence whether I wanted to proceed. But the reason why I decided to go ahead and put this unusual motions of rescinding is that we can use the $100,000 for true needs that were identified in the bonding request. We cannot borrow more money for things that will not last half as long as what we're paying back with interest. So it's pretty straightforward. I think we need to rescind that, and we need to use that $100,000 to reduce the bond issue, so our taxpayers are not paying money and interest for things that are no longer usable to the city of Green Bay. So that's my life story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Scannell?
Well, we've already voted to not take it out of bonding, so I'm not sure. And since that money can be used for other purposes, if we decide not to go forward with using it for branding or part of it for branding, I mean, who knows once we get all that information. I mean, I was leaning against this to begin with because I don't like making decisions with enough information, and we don't know anything about our marketing and our branding. I want that to come forward and decide, well, do we want to use part of this money? Do we want to use any of this money? Do we want to use all this money? And how do we want to use it? I think marketing our city is very important. Our future is very important. And marketing the city is very much a part of our future. A city that's not growing is dying. If we're going to be short-sighted about this and not work to grow, to build, you think we're having problems now? Just wait if you have a city that's not growing. So I know I've seen some comments, social media and so on, that they think this is all a joke, but I take marketing very seriously. I think our helping the city grow is very important, and branding's a part of marketing. But until I have the information about what we're doing with marketing and branding and what the costs are going to be, I have no desire to do anything else with this money. And now that it's not coming out of bonding, it can be used for other things then. So I don't know why we need to jump the gun and use it for other things now when we may end up wanting to do it for branding. So I oppose the rescission. and especially since, your intended purpose was to put it to bonding, and that's not going to happen. So it just doesn't seem to make sense now at all. So, thank you.
I request a point of order, Mayor.
Thanks, Alder Burnett.
Yeah, Mayor, my point of order, I don't know if it's clarification, but similar to what the maneuvering was, the agenda items, my belief is that we can make a motion to reconsider the vote that was just won, 10-2, I think, and we could make a motion after this vote to then reduce the bonding by $100,000. That doesn't change, so that's all. I don't know if we need to vote on that, but.
No, thanks, Alder. Alder Johnson.
Thank you. I do support the motion as well, and I agree with Alder Scannell. Marketing is important, and it should be done, and done comprehensively and done well. And I think my biggest fear last time was that $100,000 isn't enough. I actually received a communication from someone from a nearby community who was responsible for a rebranding initiative in their city, and it was $1.2 million. Because there's a lot more to this process than a logo, which we all know. This is not a logo, but there's still a lot more to it. And I think my fear all along is that we are holding money, we are reserving money, $100,000 that still can't even scratch the surface of what a true comprehensive proposal is going to cost. Meanwhile, we do have immediate needs or purposes with which we can apply this funding, and we can simultaneously have that conversation, that information gathering, holding to do an RFQ, or even doing our own individual research on how other communities have branded themselves. It's not necessary for us to hold this funding to do that. So I think both of these things can actually occur, and then we can get more information to make one of those more holistic, long-term decisions about how a rebranding initiative would help our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Gerlach.
I see that Director Steck-Schulte is available. I wonder if he would like to make some comments to give us some insight.
You bet, Director.
Certainly. Thank you, Alder. Obviously, this is something that, we certainly would be useful, very useful to our economic development staff in our department, obviously. We do agree, I guess, with the sentiment of what was previously approved of, we don't know what we don't know related to what the actual overall approach and strategy related to the branding would be. Certainly agreed with the, don't argue the fact that there are plenty of other aspects and priorities that council has under consideration. But in terms of at least being able to receive the full information based on an actual proposal, so we have hard data in terms of exactly what would be coming in and out of a particular process that would come through, then council would have the ability at that time to certainly make that decision. Would certainly be still, would certainly my recommendation still, however, would certainly understand the other things being considered at this time. It is one of the situations that if we don't proceed with that, we'll certainly kind of, I do see that as really an opportunity for, honestly, the council and the public actually to kind of have some direct input as to which direction we are taking some of our economic development efforts as we go forward on that. In absence of that, I'll kind of use a shoot anything that flies, claim anything that falls approach for another year if we have to a little bit on some of our marketing. We certainly do our best to try to identify the best opportunities and best things to do. We can certainly continue on doing that, and we will not stop marketing without an effort on this, but it does provide a unique opportunity to do so. And honestly, I am probably a little bit of a cynic. I know, knowing how many things you guys are already evaluating from a competitive standpoint in terms of what things might go on the levy. I think this is probably an easier sell from my standpoint of something that's a not levy funded initiative versus one that would maybe have to be brought forth in the regular budget going forward, which is really exactly the conversation you guys are having on all of the items that you're talking about tonight. So, again, we still would recommend, I guess, seeing what we get with an RFP and actually getting an actual response to bring a specific proposal back to council for you to evaluate. But certainly we'll certainly respect and follow through on whatever direction the body decides. So.
Thanks, Director. Alder Johnson, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification, because I gave that example and Director Steck-Schulte kind of talked a little bit too, is it levy supported versus other mechanisms? And of course, we do have a few other mechanisms in the example that I shared about a neighboring community. They used the TID. So there's, I'd really love to dig deeper into their scenario, right, of what was included in those expenditures. But my point is that there are some other things. In the case of a TID, you can use, new increment that's generated that can justify those types of expenditures. So I do think that there's some other options. And I said an RFQ before. I meant to say an RFI, request for information. That could really help us, gather some of that data. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Other comments or questions on the motion? Alder Vanderleest?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question for our finance director. What is our total debt service with the bonding that was approved tonight? If she knows that figure.
The total request?
Well, not the total, in other words, that the city of Green Bay is
Debt
indebted
service
for.
associated with bonding of this amount was the question.
At this point, I wouldn't be able to answer that. I wouldn't know at this point if we're going to be going out for 20 years or 10 years on these items. I would have that information after I've talked to our financial advisors and our bond counsel.
Is our debt exceeded 200 million? City of Green Bay?
And Alder, just a reminder that we're on this motion to rescind right now.
Yes, at this point, I mean, I could get that information and I could share it with the alders. Depends upon if he wants to consider the KI Convention Center, which is funded, we would be over 200,000.
200 million.
200 million? Okay.
200 million, thank you.
Thank you. So there's that motion to rescind on the floor with a second. Any further discussion? Alder Galvin?
Thank you, Your Honor. I understand your tenacity, Alder Burnett, but you're asking the council to rescind this when they voted 9-3, which is a significant vote in favor of what we finally decided on. You've argued this, council, at least a couple of times, I think, several committee meetings. You continue to come up short, and now you're asking for a rescind on what was a pretty decent majority. It wasn't a 6-6 tie like it was mentioned earlier today on another item that, that's pretty close. We should wait a little while then, or let the next council, have at this. And I'm just, what makes you think you can be successful at this? Have you discussed this with alders? I'm trying to wrap my head around why you're continuing to go at this to see if I can get behind this or not. And I'm having a hard time trying to figure this out.
Alder Burnett?
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't think this, I've tried multiple times. I tried once. The formal communication was at the Finance Committee, which you're a member of. The previous meetings was to use all excess Oneida revenue, but it did not include, if I recall, the money used for rebranding. So this would be my first time, and you know how the conversation went at the Finance Committee. It was, kind of a little contentious. I was caught off guard. And so, yeah, I appreciate you saying I'm tenacious, but I haven't tried multiple times. This is the only time I've tried to rescind.
Well, maybe because you've been against rebranding.
Alder
Period, from the get-go. I guess I looked at this as just another attempt to put the rebranding on the shelf and be done with it.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor,
Yeah.
again, the thing that changed, Alderman Galvin, is that when we approved that, and you're right, it was a 9-3 vote, and that's why I don't take this lightly. This is a major act. I wasn't going to do it. I was on the fence, and then I decided to, and it's because of the bond issue. We have $34,000 police cars, 12, that we're borrowing for a potentially 10 or 20-year bond issue, and they're only going to last 3 to 5 years. We have police helmets, 180, that are $400 a piece, $72,000 for officer safety. Those helmets may last 5, at most 10 years, and that's stretching for officer safety. Use the money for that. So I pushed forward when the bond issue came out, and I'm concerned about the amount of debt that we're taking, and real specific to why this is important to me is Director Schulte, when he proposed the bond issue, I remember specifically asking him at the committee level, or here at the council, what are the main concerns that developers are telling us, the reason why they're having a hard time developing in Green Bay? He didn't really say branding was the primary issue. He indicated that the tax rate and the permitting process to get projects approved were like his major concerns. I'm not going to speak for them and say that they're the only or main concerns, but those are the major. And so we look at a bond issue and that we're going to have to use $100,000 to borrow for things that are going to break down before we're done paying for it. The next year when we do this whole budget process again, we're going to be in a hole. And so I'd rather use the $100,000 to pay down the debt now and then talk about rebranding at the next budget year. So that's all. I mean, I'm being sincere. I'm not sure. I mean, I've come out strong against the rebranding. I'm very much against it. I'm more tenacious now because I look at the financial condition of the city, and that's why I'm making this push.
Well, and I guess my argument here is that I think rebranding has potential. I'm still waiting to have the experts come in and give us a chapter and verse on why it might or might not work and how it might or might not work for a municipal government. But at the same time, it's been my concern since I got elected that we bond for squad cars, we bond for things helmets that expire in 5 years. But that's been going on for quite some time, and I see no solutions coming forward to get us back where we used to have that as part of the budget. And so this is a one-time, short-term, partial fix where, as a council member, I'm just not seeing any answers to it. So we're going to be in the same trick bag next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. And probably until I go to my grave, unless somebody can figure out how to get us out of this hole. And I'm not sure what it is. I mean, we complain about taxes, then we complain about roads. You know, we complain about a lot of things, and the solutions are polar opposites of each other. And I think at some point in time, we just have to bite the bullet and move forward and do the tough thing, then don't get the squad cars. Or raise taxes. But nobody wants to raise taxes, so, all right.
I like it better when you're complimenting.
All right, thank you.
Alder Scannell.
Yeah, just a question for Director Ellenbacker. When you do the bonding, I remember talking to you about this a few years ago. Do you look at shorter bonds for some of these items that are short-lived, and then determine whether it's smarter to use the shorter or to go longer?
We certainly can entertain a shorter note on any of these items. Every single time we go out for an issue, so a bond is considered an issue like a 20-year bond, and then we have, if we do a 10-year note or a 3-year note, it's considered a new issue, so we have issuance costs. So we try to minimize the number of issues that we go out for. But we certainly have the options of trying to do, I could certainly have the financial advisors entertain us with different options on for lengths of the notes.
Okay, and have we done it in the past?
Have we gone out for shorter notes than 10 years?
Yes.
Not in the last several years. I know there has been some notes that were shorter. We've had some for a year, and then there's been some that are for 7 years, but not since the last 5 years that I've been in as a finance director.
Okay, well then I would just hope that when you're bonding, you look at all the notes and determine which is the best way to go. Shorter for some of these items, or if it's better to go longer with them, and I just trust you will do your diligence and do well. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like Director Steck-Schulte is seeking recognition, and then, go ahead, Director.
Oh, just very briefly, I think Alder Galvin, there is a third option in terms of getting your way out of this, and that's growing your tax base. That's just kind of why, and certainly the economic development guys, that's kind of what we're in the job to do. So obviously having this strategy, as much as I'd like to, I'm more than happy to avoid the conversation of having to be involved in the capital improvement plan, and our department usually doesn't have a lot of those type of expenses. Thank goodness that we can mercifully sit back in the corner and not have to be involved in those conversations from an expenditure standpoint. We are generally the ones that kind of bring in the projects. I won't call us the golden goose, so to speak, because at least obviously it's the private sector investment that really is I guess the other answer that's a part of that equation, the third variable that can help kind of finance some of these things into the future. I think your comments, to paraphrase a little bit, if you're not growing, you're dying. So I do think there is a very strong need to certainly continue and focus on that. Are there more affordable ways probably to do that? Again, we're certainly trying those right now. We do think at some point in the very near future, if we don't move forward now, we do need to undertake some sort of effort, I think, to engage not only the council, but the public to really kind of, set very clear directions on these are where we want to spend our economic development efforts on. It's rather than just kind of claim anything that flies, shoot anything that falls approach, but be very specific and detailed, I think, on doing that. And I think establishing some of the values from council and the public in this process is really, to me, is the most important part of the branding process. Again, the logo is kind of, that's the very tail end kind of thing, but that's the thing everybody sees. But yeah, really establishing those clear priorities and those efforts is really probably the thing that's most valuable probably to the department, certainly to me and my staff. So, but I just wanted to make it clear that it's, you can raise taxes, you can cut programs, or you can build tax base. Probably a little bit of combination of three is probably the healthiest way to go. But this would be an effort to help us target our efforts in terms of trying to grow tax base. So.
Thanks, Director. Other comments on the motion to rescind? Alder Dorf, and I think somebody else. Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a few. Yes, the parliamentary procedure motion to rescind, I did, a slight bit of research on it. Found out almost immediately that it can only be introduced at a time when no other business is pending. So that was one of the top items that I researched. And it's a valid parliamentary procedure. I think it might have been used back in the day when Alder Weary was a young alder a couple of times. But yeah, there's no doubt it's a valid procedure. I think it's, though, a dangerous precedent for our council to be considering. We are used to the timeline of reconsideration, in which someone from the prevailing side of a motion that is passed comes back and says, during that meeting or the very next meeting, I want to reconsider this. And that has been our common practice during the 6 years I've been on council, and I dare say longer than that, as Alder Scannell's been on and Alder Story's been on a little bit longer than me. So I object to the process. I object to this. It's valid, of course. It's not illegal to do this. It's parliamentary procedure, but we voted 9-3. And I think it's a dangerous precedent because it uses up the time of council when we should be focusing on current issues, not going backwards in time. We decided this on December 7th, 9-3, that this was a good idea. We voted, and although no money at all is pledged to anything, we haven't decided if we're going to use this money for rebranding, but we asked for information. That is what City Council did on December 7th, said, we would like some information. Please bring information back to us. And now there is this effort to stop us from getting the information we asked for back in December. And at Finance, we even put a process in place to hear the discussion of the motion that Alder Burnett had brought forward at its proper time. And that process was clearly explained in Finance, and I'm not going to waste our time explaining that right now. We're not voting here on rebranding tonight. That's not the topic. We're voting on whether we are allowed as the council to get the information that we asked for before any decision on rebranding is going to be made. I do not like this. I do hope that you vote against this. I will vote against this because it does again set a dangerous precedent for us, and it does use up the time that we should be spending on current events, not events in the past. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, boy. It's never dangerous to make a better, more informed decision. Never. So that's how I view it. When this came out, we hadn't seen the bonding yet. I think if we had, we would have made a different decision as a body. So I think it's wise to bring it up now, knowing we can put the money to use right now to, yes, defray the cost of things that won't last 10 years, like 3 cop cars or any other of the small items that are going to last 3 to 5 years. That's a wise money decision, and that's why it's back before us tonight. I applaud Alder Burnett. He had to go through hell and high water to get this here, and I'm glad I could help. I'm saddened that it didn't come up at committee from our council that it was an option, but I found it. I remembered it. There's no effort to stop getting info. In fact, Alder Burnett has mentioned several times, let's keep looking at this, but put it as part of the budget process. Just unencumber the $100,000 that's sitting there. Just sitting there, not really helping anything, doing anything. Yeah, I'm just kind of sitting around. You know, there's kind of the general idea that you're going to put me towards a rebranding effort. That's going to cost 10 times that, $1 million, so it's going to be a, spit in the bucket. But when we have projects that we looked at tonight and poured through, and we can put it towards that right now, and still look at rebranding and how you want to pay for that, you can have both. Why aren't we doing that? So I think a lot of you have seen, there's a real visceral opposition to this idea right now. So it's not popular in any way. Anybody who says it is incorrect. Let's just make a wise choices here. Let's rescind this, re-vote on it, then we can put that money towards bonding and still have discussions on rebranding and what it can and can't do. And as who are you again? Alder Johnson. As Alder Johnson stated, there's other ways to fund it. Maybe it's through TIDs, maybe it's through some grants, maybe there's some other ways to do it. So that's all I have.
Thanks. Alder Lefebvre.
Actually, Alder Weary, I agree with what you just said. I've been thinking about this. I think I voted for the branding, and now all of a sudden, when it was brought up, it could be $1 million or more than $1 million. That to me, I mean, this 100,000 isn't going to do anything then. Yeah, and I think at times, yes, we should be able to come back when we have new information on something. I don't think you should tie the council to something that happened in the past, but then you find out it wasn't the right decision. I think we should be allowed to revisit it and look at it again and vote on it. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely support this. I think it's something that, yes, maybe it's important, but it's something that we can, as Director Scheck-Schulte said, that it's something that we can keep working on. It's not something that has to be done today. It's something that we'll keep working on. So, yeah, I'll support this.
Any other comments? Seeing none. Board vote has been requested, and this is on the motion to rescind. And that motion fails 6-6. On to the report of the Personnel Committee. On to the Personnel Committee. Motion to approve made by Alder Dorff.
There's another notice.
No, it's not, there might be another notice. It's not properly before us right now.
I just asked for a point.
Alder Dorff made a motion to approve the report. Is there a second?
You know darn well.
There are other points in time, Alder.
Point of order. I want a ruling on this, and I want to vote at this council.
Attorney Bungert.
That was sneaky.
Yes.
Alder. Attorney Bungert, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify what the question was. I don't think Alder Burnett's microphone was turned on.
Right, so I moved along to the report of the Personnel Committee. A motion was
Correct.
made by Alder Dorff to approve, and then Alder Brunette sought recognition.
Right, so right now, what's before the body is the motion to approve.
Correct. Well,
Because this happened 2 weeks ago when
we're not, Alder Weary, stop your comments. We have this much more of the agenda left. There will be opportunities, and if we're not on an item, I will recognize alders who seek recognition.
clarified, it sure seemed like you were just trying to
We have a motion on the floor. Motion to approve the report of the Personnel Committee has been made by Alder Dorf, seconded by Alder Scannell. Any items here to be held separately? Hearing none, all in favor of approving that report, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Mayor, I'd like to speak.
The ayes have it, and it has
Mayor
been
likes-
approved. Alder Brunette.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for recognizing me, and I don't like to have tension if we can avoid it. I'd like to make a motion under notice as a motion to rescind the council's action from December 7th, 2021 to hold adoption of the funding resolution for the City of Green Bay's branding initiative.
Is there a second?
So,
Seconded by Alder Weary.
Mayor,
It's going to be a fairly redundant discussion. Alder Brunette.
redundancy is okay if it's good government. What I'd like to just kind of explain, the motions are a little similar. This is in fact a different motion, and Attorney Bunger can comment on it. But this isn't necessarily to move forward with the RFP. It's to hold the funding resolution. Again, it was an act of the council to pass a resolution that held that $100,000. So this basically, the previous motion would allow staff to get the RFP, which isn't a bad thing. This allows us to free the funding of that $100,000. So of course, I support it. Doesn't stop the bid, it does not stop the staff from pursuing an RFP, which, mind you, they have not done yet as of a week or two ago. And so this allows us to use the $100,000 to reduce the bonding request. Thank you.
The RFP has been issued, just so people are aware. Further discussion? Alder Dorf.
So this would be directed to Director Ellenbecker. There was a reason that we held the 100,000. Help me understand how we can hold the adoption of the funding resolution and yet still move forward with the RFP. How are those things not opposite?
Typically, before you would go out for an RFP, you would know what your funding source is.
Right.
Because you always have that concern of putting a bid out, really a request out of the street without knowing how you're going to pay for it. You don't have to have them tied together, but, that is our typical way we would move forward with it.
Okay.
Maintaining or holding the $100,000, again, this is unbudgeted 2021 money that we are looking to potentially carry over and spend in 2022. We are getting, we talked about this in January, and I said you have a month or two to, kind of make that determination. I was just looking at the calendar. We really have to make a decision by the May 8th Finance Committee meeting, which is a council, March 8th finance meeting, and then it would be the council March 15th, because my audit kicks in the next week, and I have to have these adjusting journal entries done and the resolutions complete and entered before our audit starts. So I did tell you that we had till end of February, early March, so that is still consistent with what I said. So we really do need to make a decision in the next two Finance Committee meetings on what to do with that 100,000. Do we let it? We choose not to allocate it into a carryover expense to 2022, and we would either confirm that, but I would need to know exactly what we're gonna move it, what kind of expense account am I gonna move it to, like a marketing expense, or the other way is if we decide not to spend it and then we release it and it's really just a pay favorable to our budget and it goes to fund balance.
Thank you for that explanation. I yet again am against this motion. If I feel it's necessary later, I will repeat everything I already said, but I'm really getting tired and we've got a lot more work to do. So I hope we can just get on with this and vote on this and stop these kicks at the cat. We made our decision. We made it a number of times. I would just like us to vote and be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Other comments? Alder Scannell?
That's the question.
You call the question.
Call the question.
That requires a 2/3 vote, so it's best just not to do that.
That's 2/3?
Yeah. Any further comments?
It's been so long.
A board vote again on the motion. Board vote, please, clerk. And this is on that second motion to rescind.
Alder Van. Thank you. Here's your displayed vote.
And that fails 6-6.
Yeah, if you could display that.
Is there a way to redisplay that, clerk? And it fails 6-6, as I said. Report of the Economic Development Authority. Motion to approve made by Alder Dorf, seconded by Alder Stevens. Any discussion? Alder Johnson.
I need to abstain, it's my employer.
That will be noted. Alder Johnson abstains. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Receive and place on file. Motion to receive and place on file the building report for January 2022 and the municipal court report for January 2022 made by Alder Scannell and seconded by Alder Stevens. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolutions. Motion to suspend the rules and take up these items with one roll call vote made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Lefebvre. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The rules are suspended.
Motion to be resolved on the resolution.
Motion to adopt made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Dorf. Any discussion?
Mayor,
Alder Brunette?
this is to adopt the resolutions, is that correct?
Correct.
I would like to be voted as, we're voting together, is that correct?
Correct.
I'd like to be voting, recorded as voting no on 9, and then also on the one in regard,
On
what am I?
under resolutions?
Okay,
There's just one through 4.
I think we're good, thank you.
Okay. We need to, what are we on here? We got a motion to approve and a second. Any more discussion on the resolutions? We will use the board. And those are adopted unanimously. Ordinance is first reading. Motion to advance this ordinance to a second and final reading made by Alder Scannell, seconded by Alder Stevens. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Petitions and communications. Alder Johnson, then Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mayor. For consideration, this goes to Finance Committee. For consideration and possible action to create a financial policy that no bond or note may exceed the useful life of an asset without the supermajority vote of council.
Thanks, Alder Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two for protection of policy. The first one, in an effort to restore and ensure fair elections that are fully transparent and help instill trust in the process for the citizens of Green Bay, I'm requesting we review with possible changes these measures and any others that may arise. I have 7 listed here. I could read them or not. No? Okay. And the second one is for review with possible action the 2/15/22 election and issues that arose at Central Count with the legal, public noticing and changes thereof, and any other items that may arise regarding the administration of the election. Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Any others?
I'll get those to you, Selsky.
Entertain a motion. We need to refer. Motion to refer the communications to the proper authority made by Alder Brunette, seconded by
Second.
Alder Weary. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Now Alder Galvin. Motion to adjourn made by Alder Galvin, seconded by Alder Scannell. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thanks.